The story originates at a regular Japanese school. The protagonist, Masimon Hideak, sits alone at the desk, covered by fear. Two of his classmates approach him. One of them, in the earring, brazenly hangs, putting a hand on a shoulder. They boldly demand it to bring them juice. The young man with a notebook in his hands agrees and wonders whether they should make a series of selfie. But at the same time, in his thoughts, the insults pulled up. Every day he is used as a guy on the run. The boys throw him a few coins into a cap to go down and buy them juice. Hidaka with sadness notes that all this happens only because the so-called servant of the insides has fallen into fate. He is already accustomed to the fact that the sky is always gloomy and dragged by the gray haze. Such an atmosphere has become a common part of everyday life. The guys are approached by the girl. At the moment they send Hideak on the juice. She addresses them with the question, "Are they still laughing at Hideo-kun?" The girl in glasses begins to reproach the boys. They say they are already high school students, and they behave like real bras. In response, one of the boys lightly points out that he just buy them juice, and is interested in what, in fact, the problem. The bullies are sneaking into a frightened Hideak from behind, and the guy with the earring seems to say that they are old friends, asking if it is so. While Hidaka is silent, the other guy quickly picks up. Yes, everything is true, and Kavasha-san just confused. The girl is distrustful and asks whether this is true without trusting their words. Hidaka is struck by the abusers, trying to reassure a classmate and convince her that everything is fine with him, so there is nothing to worry about. However, Kavasha doubts the sincerity of his words and decides to make sure again whether he really is in order. The guy lifts his eyes and meets her eyes. However, he immediately looks away and says that she does not understand anything from her words. He comes out of the class, leaving behind a lost girl. Hideak is convinced that there are only 4 types of people who are involved in bullying, and each of them plays a unique role in this process. He distributes them to observers, those who help, hammer, and victims. He goes on the roof and thinks, in fact, they all liked only that they did not find themselves on the scene. The Hidaka comes to the very edge of the roof and puts his hands on the railing. He seems to be broken. He is thrown over the railing, stands to the very edge, and, lifting his voice, says that he is not really broken, and this world is broken down into pages. Hideak says goodbye. He decides to put an end to everything and finally leave that life. Falling down, he thinks, maybe it was not necessary to deprive himself of life, but he could not live so on. Talking about his classmates, he involuntarily assumes that they are unlikely to notice his absence. The news of the fall of Daki quickly flew all, and was announced of the death of Daki Masamon. The young man opens his eyes and is surprised to watch everything that happens around. He finds himself in a huge hall just opposite the throne, on which a nobleman sits. On both sides of the bishop are people who, shining with joy, report to His Majesty about their success, and seems to have finally achieved the goal. Daka thinks with surprise, is he still alive, and where is it now, and where is it? The man who sits on the throne welcomes the heroes on the arrival. He happily says that he has been waiting for their appearance for a long time. Hideak does not understand what heroes are talking about, and does not understand what the stranger means. He looks around and sees that his whole class stands nearby, watching him carefully. The man, without delay, calls himself Johannes Griberg, the 47th king of the state Griberg. Hideak looks around and asks himself why the whole class group was unexpectedly transferred to this place. The king, a little upset, apologizes to everyone for urgent collection. At this point, the young guy catches the look of the one who had previously treated him, and, feeling anxious, is hastily turning away. His Majesty tells that the Griberg kingdom has been running a fierce fight against magical creatures for many years, but still remains unknown when this war is over. That is why, looking for hope among despair, they decided to call the heroes to help change the course of events. The king reports that according to the message, the heroes who are called onto their world are endowed with outstanding abilities and remarkable skills. He is already going to continue his story, as suddenly someone sharply interrupts the monarch with a loud exclamation, strictly demanding that he immediately stopped his speech. The guy who laughed at the Hidaki boldly states that nothing will be done. Roughly asks, what traits are in mind? He then addresses the king and asks whether he realizes that he actually stole them all. A small explosion is flashing right at the young man's feet. He does not touch the guy at all, but scared him to death. The king, stretching his hand forward, from which smoke still rises, solemnly states that he has just applied magic. He apologizes for his unexpected action. From the explosion, the whole audience froze in fear, and King Griberg hastened to justify himself. They say, people who do not recognize the existence of magic, Such things are not easy to explain. Hideak has a feeling that he has fallen into another world. The king continues to apologize and notes that it is best to demonstrate magic clearly. The young man who argued with the king is insanely annoyed by his act. Another classmate with a birthmark under his eye turns to him, SI. He rotates sharply and with a shade of irritation in his voice asks why he was called. He replies that around them, armed protection of warriors, so it would be unreasonable to come into a clash with the king. He proposes to listen to them, because now no one can fully understand what is really going on. Two girls support classmates' opinions and are asked to silence for a moment. These are dissatisfied, but still agrees. The king reassures. There is no reason to worry, because no one thinks of killing heroes who have been able to call with incredible effort. He emphasizes how difficult it was, but here Sai is shouting that they are really just high school students. His Majesty replies that after they called in this world, everyone received a unique abilities in their own profession, and those who got the title of hero were particularly gifted. A girl with long hair notes that it is only necessary to say the word status, and everything will become clear. She voices his name, and a characteristic panel arises. He reads in surprise. His full name is Keita. The level is the first. The class is a sage, a title is a hero, and a special magical skill is a fire hammer. The girl is stunned. She tells the king the joyful news. This guy is a sage. According to her, it is the sage who is the highest title among the knight caste, and in addition, he has a sacred attribute. The girl appeals to the king, confessing that the events around do not cease to amaze. Hideak, confused, rotates sharply. Suddenly, a shout is heard from the crowd. Someone calls the guy a hero. The king with knights is stunning to respond to these unexpected words. The girl turns to the boy with a mole, admiring his incredible characteristics. The panel appears in the name, Ichijo Yamur, the first-level hero, endowed with numerous powerful magical abilities and sword of the hero. Hideak covers horror. He sincerely believes that all this is a solid madness. He thinks, all these people once really rejoiced in life. Now they have a chance to find happiness even in a completely different world. He also begins to guess that something is happening, and barely audible, almost whispering, says status. In the panel he notices that his profession is a healer, the title is reincarnated, and the articles are significantly inferior to others. He, seeing his title and activity on the plate, explodes with anger. With indignation in his voice he throws, "Is this a blessing?" Worrying, Hideak is timidly appealing to the girl asking something to tell, but in response to a smile politely specifies what he would like to know. The girl smiles warmly, but he should ask what the healer does. How her face changes instantly. She replies that healers are experts who have dedicated themselves to the art of healing, but recognizes that this profession is considered the weakest among all classes. Hideak covers deep disappointment. He cannot believe heard. He was called the weakest. Sayati approaches him and asks if he heard it. He states loudly that Hitaka is the weakest of all, and is surprised why he appeared here at all. The girl in the glasses called him, calling Saki-kun, and, annoyed, gathering something to say, but he immediately interrupted her. Saki states that she will not be able to deny the obvious. He is the most noble here. Ekio turns to a grind and states that this time he really bent the stick. He asks whether he seems to him that he was too rude with Hideak. The guy is boldly asking whether he is really trying to make a remark. Hideak was approached by a low, gray grandfather, and, with interest in his eyes, wondered why only in his title it was stated that he was reincarnated. The whole class has stopped in hard expectation, turning to it. Hideak, hesitation and almost through force, begins to answer. At this point, the girl casts a look at him, filled with superficial disdain. Turning, Hideak confesses that he really jumped from the roof. The grandfather says that he understands him perfectly. The girl invites everyone to gather and discuss her plans for the future. She reports that they will enter the specialized academy first priority. It is there that they will focus all efforts on the development of their abilities to learn how to resist magical creatures. The girl invites everyone to take a circle to move them to a student hostel. Hideak turns away from others and depressed it, living so unbearable, which is why he decided to say goodbye to life. Sai points out that Hideak is still unable to have nothing, despite all their common adventures, although in his opinion, even a gift as healing is still better than staying unemployed. Continuing to think thoughtfully, Doc understands. Nevertheless, he has to live in his cruel everyday life. So Yiki notes that no one else will mention him, and Hidaka thinks, even in another world, everything seems to be as always. Hidaka believes that even in this world he is treated unfairly. When Sayaki is about to leave, he thinks, is it really ridiculous? He looks around and repeats his question again. He approaches Hideak and demands to repeat what he heard. Hideak replies that this does not matter, adding that he is already tired of the Siki. Angry, the fans grabs him by the collar. Hideka confidently states that it is not going to go anywhere. The girl, surprised, asks him again. The girl asks if this is true. She confesses that when she learned about his healer's ability, she immediately thought, not to take him away from the rest of his classmates? He was amazed when he heard about another place. She explained that the point of teleportation is determined by accident, so it is impossible to predict where it would go. The girl added that this is called a safety system that can always be relied on. Hey, Daka, thank you for the security system. But in response, she explains, he misinterpreted her words. The girl insists, this system is created solely for them and will only help them. She exclaims that this charming tool is created precisely to save their people. She is angry with the fact that they tried to call the legendary heroes, and as a result they received an unmistakable healer. She asks Anger how they can trust the safety of their people like him. The Shiki comes from behind and asks if he notices that, despite everything he has experienced, has remained worthless. The girl shouts that the guy has committed a difficult crime, spending their strength and hope, and now she has to pay for her own life. Hidaka is overwhelming anger, and he cannot understand why all the problems are always falling on him. He proclaims with fury that he will ease them all with this country. It swears to wrap everything around on the powder and destroy it. There will be no powder here. Everything will disappear without a trace. He watches with contempt, and the rest is surprised, when Hideak shouts with a cry of rage that he will destroy each of them, all to the last. He lies alone in a solid darkness, thinking how long it has wandered and where its paths have brought. After passing the word status, it causes its own characteristics, throws a valuation view on it, and with annoyance recognizes its own weakness. Suddenly, he notices a status that indicates obsessive obsession with the other world. The cause of this ailment is its unchanged thirst for something that exists outside the familiar reality. Hideak smiles cunningly and is interested in whether he means that he is ill. Hideak encounters 3 chests and begins to suspect that facial expressions can be hidden here. He thinks about how much time he wanders with this place and feels annoying. During this time he has only found a torch and got a dark room with chests. He opens the first chest and surprised there is nothing. He says he will look at another thing and reveal it. In a moment he notices a bottle with some liquid inside. He raises the bottle, carefully inspects it, and suggests that there may be some magic potion inside. Suddenly he hears a loud voice that orders him to drink it. Covering with fear, the hero looks sharply and asks, "Who is here?" From the darkness, a voice suggests that if he seeks power for murder, let him drink it. Daka, embarrassed, asks what is being said, but in response he hears only a persistent call to swallow the contents. He thoughtfully looks into the bottle, inadvertently thinking, is it not all? Not only this crazy story seems to him? In memory, the image of that girl, her harsh look, the prickly words, which she called him worthless. He squeezes the vial in his palm even stronger and conducts the thought, if he drinks the contents, he may finally get the strength he has dreamed of. He was repeatedly thought, if he found himself in another world, he would start life without hesitation with a pure sheet. He opens a bottle and drinks an elixir with 1 sip, with the hope that there is still a chance in this world. Having decided, he does not hesitate and completely drains it to the bottom. The roar bottle falls on the floor and crumbles into small rocks. He believes that staying alive in this deadly maze is a real miracle. So it is much wiser to risk a mysterious bottle than just to condemn yourself to death. The events unfold in the National Academies of the Kingdom of Eris, located in the heart of the Griberg Kingdom. Students walk slowly with a hostel, discussing something with each other. Suddenly, someone expresses that Erison is extremely sweet. The girl in the glasses is confused with whether they really noticed her unattractive face. In response, Sari notes that even the most beautiful flowers hide the thorns. Ichigo denies that these were only forms and insists it really has the desire to kill. He is then wondering if they will meet with Hideak. He asks Saki if he really shares his admiration. Saki asks again, trying to clarify. Ichigo asks to stop sucking because it is a hid. Saiki disdainfully points out that Ichigo is too indulged in him and asks to stop it. He has already been bored of such conversations. Suddenly, Coffee decides to remember Kita. She notes that although she was silent for a long time, she cannot but say, Saiki and Kita have always been unfairly treated with Hideak. The boys deny Kavasha's words, insisting that they did nothing like this. Psyche warns everyone not to approach Kita, emphasizing that nothing can be helped. He notes that even if they sigh in reproaches, it will not return Hideak. Seiki is convinced that he is already dead for this moment. Meanwhile, Daka lies still without a dark room surrounded by chests. Waking up, he realizes that it seems to be fainting. Although the pain was hellish, he does not feel any changes. He thinks whether it was so bright here, or is it just a consequence of the strange drink that he swallowed. Throwing the torch down, the man notes bitterly, "This brightness has a high price, an unbearable pain that pierces it now." He notices another virgin chest that was still waiting for him. Opening her, the guy thinks with interest that he is waiting for him this time. However, unexpectedly, this chest turns into a giant monster with insulated sharp fangs and rushes rapidly at Hideak. The young man does not have time to escape, and the monster causes him a serious injury. Hidaka is not crying with his voice from the horrible pain that pierces his body right now. The monster tore off a piece of his hands, stands opposite, and about it to rush to him for the second time. Hideak runs away, screaming with horror, and the monster, not pursuing him, again looks like a regular chest. Hidaka, hiding carefully, struggles to heal the wounded hand. He quarreled because he guessed that he was nothing but a facial expression. His health level fell to 42 out of 60, and mana decreased to 38 out of 50. He complains that treatment does not help, and with bitterness recognizes himself as a weakest class. He gradually realizes that he is unable to overcome such a terrible monster, but suddenly notices how his hand begins to heal. Hagayaka's glance slides on the panel, which clearly shows he received a unique skill called Blessing of the Goddess, Divine Revenge. This gift came to him through the use of the mysterious elixir of God Punishment, and with him another ability, an inverted pole, opened with him. Hideak thinks whether this thing in the same mysterious way of healing. In the panel, he reads that the reverse action allows you to arbitrarily change the condition of any object, as well as to cancel these changes. However, as soon as the change is cancelled, the polarity instantly switches to the opposite. He suspected that all these miracles were the result of healing. The announcement is heard. The launch of the divine punishment activates reverse thrust, and instead of healing now, there is a wave of erosion. Hidaka is indignantly asked why he shout in the whole voice, and is also confused, which in general means this erosion. The panel states that the erosion wave has the shape of a sphere, and spreads around the user, destroying everything living in its path. Its deadly action takes the life of everyone who touches, and the radius of influence can be increased by distributing magical energy evenly. The Hydrobos sits, immersed in reading his fragment, and thinks whether the recovery has become a powerful wave of healing, which destroys everything in its path. He believes that he can overcome this monster, so he returns to the chest. He realizes that the chest remains in the same place and will not move from the place until someone tries to open it. His hands are still trembling, though he was already able to turn his left to working position. The alarm does not leave him, and the hope of the fast end appears in his thoughts. He directs a wave of erosion simply to the monster. Thanks to the new Hideak's ability, the enemy brilliantly wins the enemy. With a barely audible explosion, he notes, "This is how the reverse mechanism works." He proclaims with a joyful exclamation that he is the first. It turns out that a notification appeared on the screen. The blessing of the goddess has been activated, and now he is offered to choose the reward. Hideak is confused because of the blessing of the goddess, because he did not even use it. Now he is worried. Will he be a well-deserved prey? In the panel, he reads a description of a new skill, mimicry, which allows to change the appearance. The skills of the Royal Arch, a space created to store things, as well as an elixir called Small Recovery, are also mentioned here. He is convinced that the Royal Arc will certainly come in handy, and wonder how much valuable it was possible to find in the seemingly ordinary chest. The announcement is heard. The facial expressed was a guard of 500 levels. Hidaka was stunned. He did not expect that this creature would be so powerful. The flow of levels of raising the level seems endless. One by one they fill the space. He is surprised when it finally stops. One of the notices reports that due to the increase in the user level, the healing force has increased. Hideak is genuinely surprised that magic has equal. In addition, his healing ability has improved. The flow of notifications does not diminish for a moment, which is incredibly annoying Hideak. Hidaka considers his characteristics with surprise. His level, skills, and abilities have increased significantly, which is amazing. The young man, looking at the panel, notes that he is not familiar with the local standards. so he is not sure whether he has the right to consider himself strong with this level. In his thoughts, anxiety is spinning, and suddenly all classmates far superior to him. The young man, looking at the darkness of the corridor, decides that the moment has come to move on. Walking through this path, he suddenly finds himself near the mysterious huge gates. He is convinced that at these gates there is some event, so without hesitation he tries to open them. However, he fails to open the door on his own, and the guy thinks how to get inside. Suddenly, the idea is lightning in his head. He knows what to do. He applies his magical ability, the Rodhousen wave, and punches a large round hole in the gate. After all, he concludes that it is not always necessary to act honestly. Entering the spacious hall, Hideak stops, stunned by an unexpected sight. Just in front of him in the air is a mysterious rod. Overflowing with joy, he runs to the staff and enthusiastically says that he finally waited for the moment when he could get the desired equipment. He runs up rapidly, but as soon as he reaches for the staff, as a powerful earthquake suddenly begins. It is difficult for him to understand what is happening around. The only thing he realizes at this moment is that the room is crazy. Suddenly, a sharp roar is heard from above. Raising his head, Hideak notices how a wide crack has fallen on the ceiling, which is increasingly spreading, threatening to break the entire structure. Finally, the ceiling is roaring, and something heavy falls on the floor, lifting a crazy crackling and causing a true horror in Gadaka. Just before the young man materializes, a giant jumped into dark armor, and with a scope, he shifts his massive sword in his direction. Hideak cannot believe that he faces the guard of the staff. The sword blade is almost touched by Hideak, but at the last moment it cleverly evades the inevitable blow. The security guard hit the floor with the sword. The blade is scattered on the debris, which with a crazy whistle fly in Hideak. The young man immediately realizes that he is opposed by a very strong opponent. However, feeling his body filled with great endurance, he does not lose confidence. Now he believes that he is able to win. Daka activates a protective aura and notices. A giant with such a fury, he pushed the sword into the floor that he cannot pull it out now. The young man realizes that he has opened the opportunity to defeat the enemy, and is strongly coming, releasing spells. He causes a brutal blow, seriously injuring him. The guard falls on the knees, exhausted with the resulting wound. The young man, watching this, already believes that the battle is completed by his victory. It is covered by surprise and joy. Everything turned out to be much easier than he expected. But the guard suddenly gets to his feet and causes Hideak such a powerful stroke that he flies to the wall, breaking it with cracks. The night rose suddenly, and the young man wondered in surprise. Why did it happen? He was convinced that he had already won her. Hideak begins to treat his wounds, thinking that if it were not for his protective aura, the consequences could be much more scary. He realizes that he believed too confidently after raising his level, although he remained only a healer. Reflecting on further actions, he decides that the moment has come to demonstrate all his true strength. He rushes to the enemy, putting all his rest in attaches. This time his blow is much more powerful than before. His blow breaks the knight, killing it. At that moment, Doc is aware that the end has come. The guardian dissolves in the air, disappearing instantly. The notification of obtaining a new subject, the sword of the senior knight, along with the upgrade of skills. The message states that mimicry style makes it possible to hide your own status even more effectively. Such a discovery is a great surprise. He did not suspect that it was working in this way. The young man looks carefully at the panel and notices. His level has already reached the 212th. However, he disappointed that despite such progress, his magic remained the lowest, only the 5th. He remembers a girl who disdainfully called him a representative of the weakest class. Within himself, he denies her words. I am sure that sooner or later everyone will be convinced. This is not true. The message states that he received a new magic artifact. Holy anger, with an attribute of holiness, a glow of light. Hideak carefully takes it to his hands and examines carefully, studying every detail. In the notification, he learns that it is a magical object and sincerely rejoices in this news. The hero is convinced that sooner or later this thing will come in handy. The events unfold at the #1 of the most prestigious National Academy of the Kingdom of Arius. The exhausted guy collapses on the floor, and the teacher is interested in his well-being. The young man replies that everything is fine with him. Then the mentor notes, his magical circle is shaky. It takes more focus. Teacher Philip Butler claims that the magic of the guy is extremely powerful. It is because of its power that it is incredibly difficult to manage it. but it is obliged to master this skill without using it or magical circles. Philip adds that if he does not be able to do so, then he did not overcome the lightest demon. He tells the boy that he is a hero, his vocation. The young hero agrees with seriousness. In the shade under the spread of the sake tree, together with a friend, they closely monitor the development of events. Sei, upset, exclaims that they lack magical power. The interlocutor, without hearing, asks, and the young man repeats with annoyance, "Why do they need this magic at all?" Sanchi notes that in the end, only one guy is able to master magic. He is told in response that it is now clear why his thoughts are so often returning to this guy. He explains Siki that all these honors are just a decoration, and a real hero and a person who is called is not the same. Unfortunately, you will not do anything. Seiki is incredibly disappointed with this news, but forced to agree with his friend's reasoning. Hidaka swallows the drink eagerly, not breaking away for a moment. He goes the corridor, holding a bottle in his hands, and with a smile confesses that though he tasted sake for the first time, the drink struck him with his wonderful taste. He considers himself extremely happy, because he came across a warehouse with a provision. So the issue of food is now resolved. He notices the massive door and thinks about whether to go. Finally he dares, cautiously opens them, looks inside, and suddenly hears someone's voice. "You have got here." On the throne, a man with sharpened ears and welcomes him, calling him an adventure seeker. Hidaka, puzzled with an unexpected scene, is stationary and cannot tread what is happening. He looks around thoughtfully, feeling everything around is full of a completely different, unfamiliar atmosphere. The man turns to a strange magical creature that resembles a volatile eye named Zur. He is wondering how many years have passed since his last time visited. One-eyed creature with a tail and wings like a bat replies that about 150 years have passed. The man thinks and is surprised to realize how much time has expired from that time. He gets out of his throne and solemnly proclaims that today is a real holiday for everyone. He approaches Hideak, seems like Cheyenne, the king of the serpent, and calls for a young man to start. He approaches Hideak and challenges him to a duel. At that moment, Hideak suddenly feels something strange in his stomach. He looks away to check what is happening. The Snake King pushed his sword in his stomach and exclaimed with horrible delight that he finally remembered that feeling. Removing the blade, he laughed ominously and added that it was the most beautiful thing for him. The young man panically feels that he is lacking in air, while Xiao with an angry, insulting, "Is this there are the same adventures that he waited for a century and a half?" While Hideak is busy with the healing of his own wounds, the king, saying goodbye, notes that they have weakened significantly since then. Cheyenne, returning to the young man, is wondered if he is sometimes a priest. Zuri asks for permission to get acquainted with his abilities. The magical creature exclaims with surprise. The guy was a healer. The Snake King assures that without assistance, the healer could not reach him on his own. Zuri points out that it is strange. The king does not understand what his creation is, and asks what it means. It tries to explain something regarding the abilities of the young man, but she never has time to agree. Hidaka grabs staff and produces a flash of sacred light that strikes the creature. From his impact, the magical monster crumbles to the powder and disappears instantly without a trace. There is a notification. The blessing of the goddess is activated. It is time to pick up his prey. The king exclaims that the young man dreamed and conceived the attack. However, Hideak has time to get ahead of it and strikes the first. He releases a mighty magical attack. I am sure that he kissed the king, and dies in anticipation of the solution, wondering whether the end has come. But it is unexpectedly found that Sean managed to evade his magical blow. The king is angry, demanding explanations about what magic he uses. But suddenly he notices his sword is cut in half. Hideak is annoying that only his sword was injured. The king causes the wounds, covered by the rage for the death of Zuri, and now seeks to take away his sword from the young man. Hideak falls on his knees from a powerful blow, and Xion with a cold smile asks whether the young man still believes that he will be able to stay alive today. Daka focuses on his own healing, while thinking that he fails to see the king snake. He moves too rapidly like a lightning. The king carefully examines the staff and asks whether this item gave birth to witchcraft that killed his magical creature. He is convinced that this is exactly the case, but it cannot understand why there are no traces of use on this subject. Cheon has confusedly notes that Hideak stands behind the hero. The young man in response reports that he already knows about him. The flying eye revealed to him that he was a healer. This Snake King wounds Hideak, convinced that the guy is hiding something. He does not trust his words and suspects that he gives his true essence. Enemies demand from Hideak to reveal the truth before causing him a decisive blow. But he is unmoving every time the same thing. He is only a healer. Continuing to strike him, the king accuses the young man of lies and claims that Hideak could have ended with him. For this reason, according to the king, Zuri remained so cautious, noticing his features. Exhausted and wounded, it lies on the floor, devoid of strength. He is unable to get up, and deep inside he realizes healing is unattainable. Chin is loudly exclaimed that he is exactly hiding something, because healers are not able to use combat magic at all. Hidaka again reminds that his true vocation is to heal others. Angry to the edge, the king threateningly requires that the stranger names his name. The guy does not understand why he has a name at all. Siki's words are torn down in memory. She said that he should take Neato, so at least better than wearing a healer's brand. Despite the numerous injuries, the Hideak with tension is raised and courageously states, his name is Nihito. He thinks that now his name is Neato. It is by this pseudonym that he seeks to become famous and exercise his revenge, because he is convinced that to be killed, Naito is an incredible humiliation for enemies. The king mockingly asks whether he really said Neato, which the guy is strongly exclaiming that he is not Neato, but a completely different person. Neato is annoyed with whether he has hearing problems. Sean asks with a mockery what a hero this guy appeared. Neato exclaimed, again reminds that he has repeatedly explained, he is a healer. The king looks at the boy with disappointment, complaining that all this is too boring. Without spending time, he rapidly attacks, leaving a few deep cuts on the young man. Neato powerless falls to the ground, and the king of snake hangs above him, announcing that his last moment has come. The enemy is swollen by his weapon, preparing to strike a fatal blow. The young man is painfully aware of himself. That's all. He will perish so nothing, and having time to leave after himself, nor to do any significant business. At the last moment, he still has time to release a wave of destruction, which stops the sword and strikes the king himself. He, without waiting for such a treacherous attack, gets a devastating blow. The defeated enemy is surprised to realize that the guy still has enough mana to spell. He is amazed. In a century and a half, there was only one except Neato who was able to win him. Neato replies that the king was skillfully possessed by the art of battle. Cheyenne only laughs at the guy's findings, ironically calling such a generous assessment of true generosity. Snake King advises him not to reveal his true essence. However, Neato will not understand what he needs. Cheyenne notes that even he is a legendary king of snakes who lived for hundreds of years and was once known for the whole continent. He was defeated by him without any effort. Lying at death, he once again asks Neato if the healer really. But not hearing the answer, he finally confesses that he now believes in his words. The king notes that the majestic and mysterious magic of the initial level will inevitably attract others. Everyone will seek to seize it. He is convinced that this world repels everything that cannot be understood, and the weak should remain at the bottom of the social ladder. Therefore, it is better for a young man to hide his true power from other people's views. Neato appeals to the king to let the question ask, and Sean clarifies what he wants to know the young man. Nadia carefully tries to find out whether he has heard something about God's retribution. Sean recalls the man who spoke about it. In his memoirs, he addresses him and shares his own decision, which he made for himself. The king of snakes is silent without a word until the young man finally turns to him, calling him his uncle. The deadly silence flows from his point of view, while he plunges into thinking, trying to understand how everything happened and what it really means. The king laughs, confessing that he felt a pleasant memory, hearing this name. Neato with a hype asks whether the owner really has any information about him. Cheyenne replied that although a long time passed, he still remembers that this name was once owned by one of the adventurers. Neato did not have no idea who these are the adventures, but the Serpent King assured him, it is only necessary to go on a journey, and everything would be in place. The young man is convinced that the king knows something exactly about it, but Sean does not pay attention to his words and lightly points out that he was pleased last time. The Snake King asks the real name of AIDS, understanding that he invented a nickname for himself. The young man, thinking a little, decides to reveal the truth and calls his name Masimon Hideak. Shingon, smiling, repeats the question and tries to tell the name of who the guy was up to AIDS, but he does not have time for him. Neato appeals to him, noting that he has become completely different, not as it used to. However, the King of Snakes no longer hears his words. He died without standing deadly wounds. Meanwhile, the screen appears on the screen. The blessing of the goddess is activated. Please collect the reward. Neato notes how Cheyenne's sword rises into the air and begins to spread. The guy receives the gear, the snake sword of Kurgal. Neato thinks whether he should use such weapons, because he is just a regular healer. The young man looks carefully at the king and says that he deserves recognition. Neato gets a new ability, an ominous eye of truth that enables him to see the characteristics of the goal. He decides that this skill has gone to him from the Flying Eyes Zuri. Thanks to Sean, he receives the Divine Speed skill, which gives it incredible agility. The young man looks at the fallen enemy and is surprised. Why did he still not dissolve in the air? Neato notices a ladder and decides to explore it, hoping that it will help to get out of this confusing maze. Rising the stairs, he firmly decides, at any cost he will get out of here, even if he takes years, and will not allow himself to die until every abuser receives a well-deserved retribution. She assured Lerna that getting rid of the hangover to the magicians is easier to simple, so he continued to pour a sake without reproach. As he climbed the stairs, he could not get rid of the obsessive thought. When would all finally end? Suddenly, a cry is heard. Someone is crying, warning Zika about the danger behind. Neato looks alert. I am convinced that he has just heard someone's voice. Neato suddenly finds himself in the deaf forest, looking around and not understanding what is happening. Looking around, he does not understand how he found himself in this forest, because he just climbed the stairs. He feels a strange feeling and guesses that he was teleporting, although he remembers that he had not touched anything and has not put any mechanisms. Neato rejoices from the fact that he finally got out of a creepy maze. He is overwhelmed by the delight of anticipation of new adventures in the unknown world. It is at this moment that he hears someone near the name of Alfred nearby. He turns to the sound of the voice and hears the way someone warns the Zik to be more careful. There are 3 young men in the forest, and one of them is loudly exclaiming to a girl named Elsa, warning her to be more attentive. Elsa, in response, cuts off that he is well aware of her actions and does not require his instructions. The young man does not continue to quench. Elsie reproaches for her indifference, they say. She did not even bring an eyebrow. Neato involuntarily suggests that it is quite ordinary people before him. They are intensely considering who Neato is and in which way he got here. A young man with long dark hair notes that this does not matter, and suggests that Neato could listen to their conversation. He picks up the sword and moves to Neato with a threatening appearance, warning his comrades who intends to immediately end him. The guy, sure that Neato follows them, is strongly coming with the sword. Neato shouts, ordering him to stop and lower his weapon. He insists that he does not understand what conversation with a long-haired guy is talking about. The guy does not pay attention to his words and strongly rushes. Waving his sword, he tries to kiss the enemy, but Neato has time to dodge literally before the impact. The guy with the sword is preparing to strike another blow, but suddenly Neato disappears from his field of view, which brings the enemy to extreme surprise. Neato appears unexpectedly behind the guy, shouting loudly that he will not be able to complete. In his hands he shines with a sword, whose blade is pressed directly against the neck of their girlfriend Elsa. A guy with a Catanese with swearing confesses that he was unnoticed. Neato appeals to him not to move, assuring that he only wants to ask a few questions. Neato persistently demands that the guy obey his orders. At first, he orders him and his friend to put the swords back in the vagina immediately. Elsa reports Zik that they have already lost. She claims that Neato's movements were so rapid that her eyes did not have time to follow him, and she could not even feel his approach. The guy holds the sword firmly, reflecting on his next step. The guy finally realizes that they are now in a hopeless position. He releases the sword, states their surrender loudly, and begs to release his girl. Neato covers an incomprehensible feeling of acquaintance. He does not trust the young man and suspects that his regular widespread trick. Zik replies that he even removed his hands from the sword, but no one still trusts his words. The guy persistently assures him in his sincere intentions, and Neato sinks into reflections. Finally, Niso releases a frightened girl. I am grateful, she thanks him, and nodding reports that she goes on. Suddenly, Zik asks to stop for a moment. Neato is turning annoyed and asks if they still intend to kill it. The guy seems to be, but Neato sharply breaks him, stating that it is not interesting to him. In response, Zik calmly says that there is only one request to Neato. The guy appeals to Neato for help. He, stunned by such a surprise, laughs embarrassed without holding back a slight nervous curtain. The guy does not even have time to answer how Elsa screams sharply on the Zika, demanding that he does not draw Neato into this story. He decided it was too pain for him, so he was not even going to interfere and help them. Finally, he gives them advice, not to beat anyone anymore, because it is bad. After waving his hand for goodbye, the man turns and slowly goes away. Neato does not have time to step a step, as a bark suddenly calls on fire magic to the battlefield. Huge flame balls grow over the head, which lightly breaks towards the Neato. He is skillfully evading the blow without believing his own eyes, and asks the Zek what is happening. The guy with a fiery hammer lifts a powerful pillar of flames that flashes inside the clouds. Zek calmly replies that he will act without emotions, and keeps a cold head. During the attack, Zik does not get tired of asking for help, assuring everyone that he needs very little support. Neato considers this guy real crazy. The young man thinks about the words of Zeke and everything that is happening around, and cannot understand how it is possible to stay away in such a situation. In the end, he decides to act. In the meantime, Zeke is trying to explain why he sought help. He turns to the magic of the ominous eye, and before his look there is a panel with the characteristics of Zika. It indicates the full name, Lighting Bach. He opens that the chick is a knight, endowed with strong characteristics, and has a wide arsenal of magic and fiery skills. Neato sincerely admits that he cannot hide his envy for him. He reproaches Zik for being so powerful without need. The guy in response points out that Neato says only because he never wired such a force. Zik does not stop the offensive and strictly exclaims to Niero, so that he does not behave in a similar way. Mito remembers how, as he climbed the stairs, he tried to wrap one of the squeezes, the magic of assignment of properties, that is, to impose magic of neutralization. He already realized that he knew neither the boundaries of the artifact nor the forces will be covered, which he was able to destroy. That is why he had to wait so long. It was possible to test this force only in a real battle. Neato notes that there is a gap between them in the levels, so right now is the best moment to try their strength. Zam, puzzled, asks Neato, which he says. However, Neato ignores his questions without answering with a word. Instead, he skillfully neutralizes Zaka's magical attack, using magic cancellation. Neato, thanks to magic, was able to stop his own magical offensive. Zik, confused and impressed, cannot understand what happened to his magical circle and how it could happen. He gradually comes to the idea that Neato is a real monster. Angry, Neato is preparing to strike back and gently asks whether they were going to resort to their dirty approaches from the beginning. Elsa grabs Niso by his hand and sincerely apologizes for her friend's behavior. She is afraid that he can kill her girlfriend and confesses that she tried in vain to justify his actions. The girl in despair exclaims that the act she had done was a mistake, and she realizes it. But begging Neato to spare her girlfriend, she swears to fulfill any of his requirements. Only he showed mercy. Suddenly, Neato emerges in memory bitter memories of how Saki once mocked him and treated with hostility. A nervous funny sniffs out of his mouth. Neato, with notes of disappointment in his voice, asks whether he now looks in someone's eyes. He emphasizes again, he is not going to help these people, so he is strongly heading for his way. Suddenly, Zik expresses Neato's proposal to join their team. Neato, stunned, rotates. His face reflects genuine surprise and confusion. Zik says that he has long realized he is not alone and is able to change many. That is why he is now looking for truly powerful allies. Zika's confession is stunning Neato, leaving it without words. According to Zik, their organization has only 4 existing members now, and not everything is happening as smoothly as they would like. At the same time, they are in dire need of strength. This deficit is felt more than ever. Z is convinced that Neato is great for their team. But the guy thoughtfully asks what benefits he will get if he decides to join them. Zika confidently states that he can get everything he wants, but Neato renises, they say. Now he does not need anything. Zik asks with interest whether Neato will refuse, even if they are able to fulfill any desire. Elsa strongly demands that Zika immediately stop his annoying exhortations, but he remains unwavering. He confesses that he has little time, and now he needs a reliable associate. From his clenched hand, he calls his loudly and turns to Neato, asking him to take something. The young man cautiously takes the ring to his hands. Zaya confirms that it is thanks to this decoration that they will be able to communicate. They pour their magic into the product, and now even a long distance will not interfere with their connection. Zik advises Nietzsche not to rush to refuse, and first it is good to reflect on their proposal and answer only when he is sure of his decision. ZK says that their organization was called Dragon's Heart, and their main goal is to finally clear this world from the rotten ruling class for the sake of a common good. With an ironic smile, Neato asks whether they really considered him a supporter of their ideology. According to Zika, they organized an attack on the ownership of the Duke, where they are now, and after their raid there was no living soul left. Neato thinks whether they have interrupted everyone in this place. Given the words of Zika, he concludes that the smartest is to take the ring and take it with him. Comrade Zika and Elsa is genuinely surprised by such a decision. He watches with a sincere surprise how Neato uses a spatial storage. Neato has wondered if this spell is really so rare that the guy replies to that for the first time in his life he witnesses such a miracle. Neato is interested in what plans for the boy for the future. In response, Zik says that their journey is currently going to the kingdom of Griberg. ZK reports that this country has caused the heroes a month ago and now seeks to understand this business on its own. Neato is aware of horror. He had already missed a whole month since he has been in this world with the whole class. He worries that during this time he missed many important events. Noticing the alarm of Neato, Zeke is wondering that he is concerned. Immersed in his own reflections, Neato did not even hear the question. Recognized, he lied that he thought only about the trip to the city. Elsa gladly reports that their path runs to Gausen, and within 3 days of a walk they will reach the goal. Zik suddenly recalls that Neato has not yet called them his name. The guy decides not to reveal to them his real name, because their path runs to Griberg. So he seems under a pseudonym, Neato. However, the king of the Shan, who also turned to him as Neato, suddenly appears in memory. From now on, he decides to call himself Neato. The young man lifts his gaze into the sky and is filled with unspeakable joy. Here she is, the long-awaited freedom. He walks slowly with the forest, catching every moment of rest when you can just go without any worries. Suddenly, the silence cuts through the unexpected rustle in the crowns of trees. Suddenly, a flock of wild wolves arises, and Neato does not hide the delight of such a surprise. He is overwhelmed by joy. Here it is, a real other world. Neato feels the atmosphere around him. It remains only to find a way to relieve tension. He first decides to use magic to check their condition and see it. He notices that their level is too low for him, only 8th. In memory, it appears as Zika had as many as 48 points, and it was such an indicator that seemed familiar to this world. He is already alert to the battle and proclaims that it is time to go in search of prey. Neato hears a cry. Someone politely asks him to bend. At the same moment, the unknown and breaking out of the place rapidly rushes to the scared wolves. In seconds, this man dealt with all the flock of hunting wolves, even without any effort. You warn Neato that they are in an extremely dangerous place. A girl with a short haircut, which so easily dealt with the wolves, was surprisingly sweet. She wondered with concern if Neato was not injured. The young man replies that he did not get any injuries, although he believes that he got more than enough. The girl proudly reports that Neato does not threaten anything, despite the seriousness of the situation. Meanwhile, Neato is interested in her characteristics. So he learns that the Icarurt layer is a senior knight of 32. The girl comes close to Neato and in surprise notices that her words are not pleased. Neato is confused and frightened by such close layers. A girl named Mishera is called loudly from the carriage, and she sits inside with Neato. The man who sat quietly nearby is a merchant. With a friendly smile, he seems like William Vector, and introduces Kucher, named Kase. With a dry irony in his voice, he adds that I am glad to get acquainted with you. The girl is called the Ekarota layer, and does not look at the nitro. Under the weight of her relentless vision, Neato voice her chosen nickname. But the layer is just surprised, they say. The name is very weird. Neato involuntarily begins to think about what is wrong with her. William reports Neato that they carry goods to Rodhousen. With a smile, he remembers how he accidentally met Miss Layer when he was looking for a support in the capital. Sleeping his gaze, Neato confesses that he will probably only interfere with them on the road. However, the merchant denies. The more satellites, the more interesting and easier the trip. The man looks at the girl with admiration and notes her extraordinary insight. She felt the danger before something happened, and was lightly jumping out of the carriage, even leaving him a chance to understand what was happening. He confessed that he had never seen the White Royal Knights during the battle, though he heard a lot about their feats. The layer modestly stated that she did nothing special. Neato is amazed at who the Royal White Knights are, and William is simply stunned by the fact that the young man has absolutely no idea of them. He says that the capital of Rodhousen is subordinated to kings from an ancient dynasty, which has not left the throne for generations. Currently, King Arnold Rodhousen is governed by the country. William continued his story, explaining that the Royal White Knights are a special detachment that is stationed in the capital, and subordinates only the monarch himself. The man notes that the Royal Knights in white rarely appear on humans. Beyond these single ones, almost nothing is known about them. William turns to Cher, emphasizing that to meet such a noble knight in this place is a real miracle. The girl is embarrassed by his words and in a hurry to deny their sincerity. Neato cannot hide astonishment. He did not expect to meet a girl with white hair. Looking closely at her, he realizes that she really resembles a heroine from another world. Cheryl hints with a smile that William knows no less, but the merchant only jokes in response. He does not compare with her leg. Shuru is delighted to talk about William, noting that he can buy the most rare things that you will not find anywhere else. She argues that his name is familiar to anyone who has involvement in trade, and the glory of him came even to the neighboring kingdoms. Relying on the words of the layers, Neato decides that William is urgently needed while traveling. But the merchant, meanwhile, rejoices. His affairs go up as never before. William is interested in Neato as he was in such a place. The young man decides not to reveal all the details and not talk about himself with cleanliness, so he is frying that he was just looking for adventures. The man assumes that Neato goes to the guild. Neato is certain. In this world there is certainly a corner where human dreams are born. He informs the merchant of his intention to go there, and the layer with a smile suggests to accompany Neato to the guild after arriving in the capital. An interesting girl asks what class Neato belongs to, but the young man is hesitant. He is not sure whether they should reveal their true essence. Neato mentions Chion's advice about the need to hide his true person, and also thinks about the words spoken by Zack. He is given doubts, and he tries to decide which way to choose next. He inadvertently thinks, maybe lies and seem to be a sorcerer or a skilled sword. However, this idea itself causes him sudden nausea. The layer rotates again to him and waits carefully to the answer. Neato decides to reveal the truth. He confesses to the class of healers, which is amazing, William. He immediately assumes that Neato is looking for a team among members of the guild. The young man confesses that he would be glad to have such a course of events if a similar chance had fallen. Sherry proposes to entrust the conversation with guild. I am convinced that they will certainly be able to find the right decision. The girl confidently assures that he will definitely find satellites, because brave warriors and experienced adventurers are always happy to accept the team of a skilled healer. She says that with this light, he can be a real example for anyone who feels depressed because of their low position. Neato notes her confidence and makes a promise to do everything possible. While traveling to the capital of the Shar, she is easily addressed to Neato with a proposal, whether he wants to master the art of fencing. The layer notes that during the exercise with the sword, his mana is not spent at all, because it has nothing to do with magical attacks. What is in surprise to ask, can healers also have a sword? The girl is genuinely surprised. She is unclear why Neato believes that if he is a healer, then the sword for him is a forbidden tool. She confidently assures that healers can use any weapon, though an axe, though a sword, even a rapier. Neato realizes that the class does not really have as many restrictions as he had the idea before. And all this thanks to the words of a girl who convinced that healers are only able to heal and know nothing more. Neato decides to check whether the healer is able to use magical attacks. For example, to cause fiery balls or zippers. However, the layer notes that such abilities are too complex and hardly feasible. It begins to explain that the differences between the magician and the healer are quite significant, because the very essence of their magic differs dramatically. Neato is interested in why to appoint attributes at all, explaining that he is still a beginner and is not very aware of it. The layer replies that the definition of attributes is different from the magical properties. The guy specifies what this difference is. She explained that the main difference is that attributes are a special magic that works solely on weapons. Without magical power, it is simply impossible to use properties such as fire or water. For Neato, these explanations seem too complicated, and it was almost nothing. The layer notes that among the healers of the use of sign abilities is a real rarity, so it urges Neato still to choose a sword path. However, Neato is convinced that this new talent is sure to be useful in this world. Sherry is sure to tell her with enthusiasm if Neato suddenly wants to try his hand at fencing. Neato, together with his comrades, reached a small village called Tanya. William suggested making a break here after a grueling journey. After jumping from the cart, they noticed how a crowd of men gathered around someone. Fascinated by interest, decided to find out what happened and asked questions to the locals. The grandfather, sitting in the heart of the crowd, drew attention to their village and asked who they were. Neato, Shara, and William greeted and introduced themselves, saying that they were heading to Rodhousen and seeking to stay in this village for a few days. But the man regretted them with regret, explaining that the community could not accept any guests. The headman said that the robbers were recently attacked in their village, and all young girls were abducted cruelly. A crowd of locals raised the noise, saying that they could not stay away. They are their responsibility to save the stolen girls. It is for this reason that they gathered here today. I think these bandits are different from the usual. Their attack on the village was carefully planned, and they are probably connected with the illegal merchant. She summarizes. Before the girls are sent away, there is quite little. Considering the facts collected, the girl concludes that without outside support, the locals will not be able to save the captives. Cher boldly states that he will take over the mission of rescuing girls. The head of the village denies, they say, to do it wrong, because they are guests in their village. But William replies that they are not guests, and the elder can rely on them. The merchant assures that these opponents do not pose a case, because they are both true. The layer approaches the peasants, and, full of determination, asks whether they heard something about the location of the robbery camp. Suddenly, the crowd covers a wave of excitement, and someone is loudly exclaiming that he knows well how to get there. A small boy named Jake boldly goes forward. With confidence in his voice, he says that from the very beginning of the attack he followed the bandits. While all the adults went hunting, he followed the malefactors with a thumb and marked the trees in the footsteps, so as not to lose their path. He says that after he conquered the top, he came across their camp and saw his mother along with other girls locked in lattice. The elder notes that Jake's mother is the only native soul left with the boy. He emphasizes that it is necessary to act immediately, because the delay can cause the girls to be taken away. Jay assures that he is able to carry everyone directly to the bandits' camp, and loudly declares his intention to save everyone. The four goes up the steep slopes, and soon a camp of robbers appears before them. The layer insists that the guy returns to the village on his own, explaining that the most dangerous is still ahead and he cannot stay with them. Jake agrees without hesitation and, without spending time, quietly disappears in the direction of the village. Watching the bandits and captive girls, Neato catches himself thinking that the whole scene reminds him of one game episode. The layer whispers softly, which will give him a sign when he and Kite leaves the place, and politely asks him to stay here and wait for the signal. Sherry explains to him that healers do not have attacking magic. Neato assures her that she remains nearby, asks not to worry, and promises to help if something happens. Neato looks at the girl, hidden by her upset with her words that the healer should stay here. He considers such a warning to be superfluous for someone, but not for himself with his abilities. But then he remembers. The layer does not even know what he is really capable of. He only has to be comforted by the fact that he still seeks to follow someone, like a true white knight of royal legends. At this point, the village head is anxious about whether four heroes are really able to cope with a whole gang of robbers. William calls to believe them, explaining that it is already on their side, and the layer now hugs the title of Royal White Knight. The girl skillfully impressed one of the robbers and quickly moved on. At the signal of the layers, Neato carefully came out of the ambush and began to look at several silky bandits, which had just been overcome by the layer. He, with a slight smile, notes that the events unfold exactly as he predicted from the layer. After all, she is a royal white knight. On this, the girl only calmly points out that in fact, such as she was a little. Liberating the girls, Cheris makes them aware that the team will bring them to the village so that they are not worried and feel safe. Because of this, everyone calm down and get ready to go home. The layer believes that they are extremely lucky. Right now, the rest of the band went somewhere. But even though no soul is around, Neato does not leave in disturbing feeling. He looks a veil, catching suspicious notes in the air. The layer confuses Neato, urging him to move on, but the young man warns her not to lose vigilance and remain alert. It is at this moment that an unfamiliar voice in the air is a question. Where do they go? Returning to the camp, the bandits immediately surrounded Neato, his comrades, and saved girls. The layer recognized these scoundrels and was already going to talk about them, but one of the bandits broke it half a word, caught up, and emphasizing that these types could not be entrusted with any business. Nino immediately understands that the abduction of peasants was only a trick to distract attention. And the layer, meanwhile, recognizes a stranger, Oliver Joe. He is in surprise to ask where she knows him. The girl confidently calls him the former royal knight of Rodhousen and the commander of a detachment of delight known as Ashy Squadron. She says that 2 years ago, the detachment commander suddenly destroyed all his subordinates, which burned the fire of a new war. Oliver bows with a slight irony, thanks for dating, emphasizing that apparently he is now a genuine gangster. The layer cannot understand why people are following him all the time. Oliver again asks her this question. He is wondering whether someone still believes in these royal and knightly promises given to their homeland. But do anyone need these outdated formalities at all? The layer is outraged by Oliver's words, emphasizing that the current king of Rodhousen is a man of extraordinary generosity and generosity. However, Oliver does not lose the opportunity to remind her of the strict order of the king, known as the Absolute. He argues that the killers have the same view as the layers, and is interested in whether a person who swore allegiance to his country has the right to look at the same way. He is convinced that now Cheryl will hurry to deny that she is not at all. However, even without giving her a chance to answer, he immediately invites her to sell herself more. Oliver mercilessly orders to deal with all, and the bandits without hesitation rush into the attack. The layer quickly stands before Neato, calling him and others to stay away, desperately trying to protect everyone. Without a moment, I answered the bandits' attack. I was rapidly applying the magical attack of the ice front. A powerful ice wave was just one blow to several enemies that rushed to me. Oliver splashes in the palm of his hand, passionately saying, "That's exactly what it was worth expecting from the White Royal Knight." Shira is outraged. He was able to see her magical attack. Oliver is sure that a newcomer like her will never be able to hide anything from him. At that moment, when the layer does not notice anything around, one of the robbers notes that Neato is left without protection. He instantly decides to take the opportunity, and rushes to him with an attack. Suddenly, a cop arises in front of him and effortlessly destroys the enemy with a powerful explosive barrier. After that, he turns to the shear, calling for it to concentrate all the attention on the center. Neato is genuinely admired by the talent of layers and Ka, confidently believing that the skills of the attackers do not compare them. He is firmly convinced that such robbers would be impossible. Shara and Kai are effortlessly dealt with their opponents. Oliver, watching the duel, notes that the robbers are quite weak, and with disappointment thinks that for all years of their atrocities they have never learned anything that could make them stronger. As soon as the layer dealt with the last striker, as a familiar voice came to her hearing, who broke the air with a desperate shout for help. Seeing Jack in Oliver's arms, the woman rushes to them, but she is restrained. Jack screams, but the bandit grabs him for his hair and orders to shut up immediately. The layer looks at Jack and asks that he forgot here. Oliver smiles and confesses that he has long been accustomed to coping with everything. He emphasizes that he was releasing himself, while in a hostile territory, was an extremely careless step on the part of the Royal Knight. At this point, the layer strictly demands that he release the boy immediately. Jack breaks down on a shrill cry, begging anyone to save him, and Oliver annoyedly orders him to shut up immediately. Oliver threatens to pierce Jack's ear or throat for an excessive noise. He lifts the blade to his own neck and mockingly throws, "The main thing is not to kill him inadvertently." The layer realizes that he will no longer have time to save him. With eyes full of tears, she desperately exclaims the boy's name. Suddenly, Neato appears imperceptibly behind Oliver, squeezing a dagger in his hand. Neato lightening a knife in his throat. So rapidly that Oliver and others do not even have time to understand what happened. Oliver dies almost instantly from the wound obtained. Jack, stunned by turning, exclaims as Neato found himself so close. The guy ignores the question, instead notices everyone around him is only looking at him. Worrying, he says they are time to return to the village, because the villagers who are waiting for their return can begin to worry. Chaos agrees with Neato, but the layer suddenly grabs him by the shoulder and insists, let him first explain everything to her. The young man does not understand what is being said, and, smiling cunningly, asks what she wants to find out in him. The layer sharply turns him to himself and begins to ask the inquisitively how he succeeded. She notes in surprise, he is a healer, so it is difficult for her to explain how he was able to put an Oliver straight into his neck, and so lightly to move. It breaks onto a cry, and requires to admit whether it hides something important from it. Seeing the crazy anger of the layer, he realizes that he was in a difficult situation. The layer recalls the status, and requires it to show it immediately. Trying to avoid the situation, Neato proposes to return to the village first. The layer reluctantly agrees, but he hardly demands that he explains everything immediately after returning to the village. Neato and Kais remain alone, and the guy does not restrain the admiration. He is genuinely surprised by the magic of Kais, calling it truly striking. Kai is suspicious of Neato and replies that his magic cannot be compared to Kai's skill. Neato at this moment catches himself thinking that Kai's eyes are reading almost a desire to destroy it. Neato watches the lair and locals. He thinks that they had to witness his strength. But if he did not intervene, Jack may have been no longer alive. He does not want to neglect Sean's advice. However, he is convinced that he did the right thing. After all, his choice can be considered noble. The whole farm was looking forward to their return. And when the peasants finally saw the girls who were stolen by robbers, there were no boundaries. Neato recedes to the side, watching a touching scene of family reunification. But suddenly his attention is attracted by the girl standing alone near the stable, hiding her face under a deep hood. He is interested in the girl if she will return to her relatives. However, she does not even look in his direction, silently standing in place, which is quite confused by Neato. A woman with short hair wondered if this girl was local, from their village. She noted that, despite the fact that they were kept together, she did not know where the girl was brought from, because she did not talk to anyone and did not answer any question. Cher carefully notices what difficult trials the girl had to pass, and gently assures, everything is left behind. From now on, they will not allow someone to hurt her, but will surely support and help. Cher is reassuring her, saying that it is not necessary to worry. Tomorrow they go to the royal capital. There they will be able to apply to a special institution to help her return to her hometown. Neato adds, if a girl is unhappy with something, she can always go where she wants. But until they know where it comes from, it is impossible to return it to their hometown. The layer quietly suggests the boy to be softer in the statements. But to the surprise and the Neato and the layer, the girl suddenly grabs the boy at the edge of the clothes. The upset girl is strongly going away, saying that she now leaves everything on the shoulders of Neato. The young man is aware that he apparently bent. However, the girl adds that for some reason she did not like the layer from the beginning. Neato is surprised that the girl has spoken and asks why she has not yet said a word. The girl quietly replies that he is not like that, but Neato cannot disassemble her words. She drops the hood, opening her face in front of Neato and calls her name Itorica. When Neato notices a girl pouring a blush, he himself is uncomfortable. Toa Turkek asks if Neato listens to her. He replies that he heard everything carefully to the last word. The girl asks to turn to her briefly. Then. Meanwhile, the layer is watching their conversation on the side, and dissatisfaction is read on her face. The young man was already going to introduce himself as Neato, but suddenly he thought, should it be done? Thinking, he concludes that lying is not the best idea, so he finally sincerely names his real name, Masimon. Taudznikovka asks her to contact him, Neato, in the presence of others, and she agrees without hesitation. The guy is wondering why she was grabbed. What then she gets off and confesses that she does not know herself. She tells, she was hiding in the forest when she was suddenly caught. Neato tries to find out where the girl comes from, but only shrugs her shoulders and says she doesn't remember. So the guy concludes that they will have to be patient. To agrees with him, supporting this idea. While they loaded things on a visa, Kay asked William asking how he treats the events that unfolded today. He wondered what his abilities could show Neato if he became a royal knight. Kai considers it a real miracle and recalls how Neato Oliver, having only a fragment of a sword and nothing more. However, it is most confused not by this, but by the fact that the class belongs to Neato. William thinks of whether Neato will later be prone to aggression, ironizing over how the inappropriate class was chosen by such a desperate adventure seeker. He predicts that Neato is waiting for a difficult way, but Kai immediately denies it. The case is absolutely convinced that Neato will never have any difficulty. He is convinced that the young man is a real monster. William is sincerely impressed with his words. Even if the case itself thinks, the situation becomes even more exciting than it was before. William smiles, and the layer moshers ominously at the Toei, who is smoking peacefully, leaning on the shoulder of Neato. The guy is alert. The look of the layers seems to him a creepy and even frightens. At dawn, 5 travelers left Tanya village and went on the road to Rodhousen. Suddenly, the layer recalls that Neato promised to show her status. She cannot believe that the usual healer managed to cope with such a rival as Oliver. She hopes that this time he will give her a more convincing answer. Initially, holding back anger, the girl sharply asks if he is only a regular healer. What a man nods calmly, confirming his words. Neato demonstrates William and Sherry the updated characteristics panel, and sincerely confesses that he had not to hide her true status from her. He points to the ability of divine speed, and states that it was through this ability that he was able to get to Oliver so quickly. Shura confesses that she realized everything, and sincerely apologizes for her behavior. Neato gently matches that he does not hold evil and has no image. Everything is fine. Smiling, he mentally notes how lucky to have such a talent as the ability to own facial expressions. Right now, this skill was needed. When the carriage stops near the giant walls, William enthusiastically reports that they finally got Rodhousen. Neato is passionate about herself that the city is really impressive in its scale. That's what it imagined the capital. Walking through the city streets, William suddenly reports that their paths are here, because it is time to go to the royal castle. For goodbye, he calls for friends to protect himself. Neato sincerely thanks William for bringing him to the capital. They say goodbye, and the merchant goes to their business. The layer proposes to return to the guild, as they planned first. They approach the majestic and luxurious building. Inside, they are waiting for a sea of people who have fun at the tables. Neato is surprised that the guild is combined with the tavern, and the layer, meanwhile, invites him to approach the rack. There, the girl politely asks the hero to put her hand on the crystal ball, so they will determine his status for further registration. He puts his palm on the ball, thinking of using his ability to imitate, hoping that he will be lucky this time. The hero does not seek unnecessary publicity and prefers to stay in the shade. The girl says his chosen nickname, confirmation that his skill gives her fruits. The ball shows the updated panel with its characteristics. The girl confirms that he really belongs to the class of healer and accepts this data. Neato rejoices. Everything was best possible. The layer reports that the registration has been successful and is interested in what he should do next. Neato thinks, and then addresses the question if she wants to go to government agencies immediately. He notes that they could learn something about her hometown, but the girl waves, postponing it for later. Neato notices that Ta is upset and thoughtful. The young man decides to ask the girl whether she wants to become an adventure search. To his surprise, the girl immediately and without hesitation accepts this proposal. Suddenly, someone goes to Neato and suddenly puts his hand on his shoulder. A giant with a disheveled beard and a mug in his hands, barely holding on his feet from the drunk, winking Neato and brazenly offers, they say, "Wouldn't you want to share the girls with him and his company?" He's swayed that he has already got two, so he is generously ready for fun. Neato politely refuses, noting that these girls are only his girlfriend, but he notes that a man literally does not give him rest. The man irritates whether they may just go, because they seem to be friends for him. He ironically asks whether there is only a healer, and begins to make fun of anywhere. They say, everything he is able to eat the detachment. And if you suddenly happen to something serious, it will immediately irritate your mom. Toa contemplates the picture with an expression on the face, while hearing a man proudly states that they are adventurers of the C-class, and will undoubtedly be able to give them advice. Yara intervenes in the conversation and categorically demands an apology from the man for his words. However, he just smiles in response and throws, "Why do you at all this guy?" He proposes to stay with them instead, promising that he would definitely be fun with him. Suddenly, several boys in the night uniforms break into the guild. It turns out that they are here because of the lair. They search for it. The girl runs to the magic, bends on his knee, and with a joyful glow in his voice exclaims that she finally found her. She sincerely confesses that she was glad to return the magic to the capital whole and unharmed. In response, Shar addresses a girl named Annette, noting that they have not seen themselves for a long time. Neato is stunningly watching the respect of Annette with the magic. The grid turns to Neato and is interested in who all these people are. The layer disdainfully points out that this man does not deserve any attention at all. She introduces her satellites to Neato and Toa, telling them that she met them on the road to the capital and promised to hold them to the guild as soon as they reached the cities. Neato notes that Shire took care of them. Hearing this, the joyful Annette asks whether it is time to return to the castle. The man is irritatedly grabbing a layer by the collar and muttering that she has the courage to despise his warning. The grid sharply dropped it on the floor, twisting his hand and exploding the indignation for the courage to touch the layer. The man yelled in pain, crying that it was unbearable. When she dealt with him, Annetta advises Cherry to leave this place. At that time, Neato inadvertently thinks about what ease Annette coped with the adventurer of the C rank. Standing near the guild, Shurs says goodbye. Before the last separation, she once again asks Toa whether she is sure and that he does not want to join the government right now. But then she answered that she does not need it now and everything is fine. The layer emphasizes, if something happens, you should say that they are familiar with the Ekariert, and asks Neato to take care of Toa. The young man responds confidently, assuring that she can count on him. The guys think about what to do next. Neato suddenly recalls that they have no money at all. Suddenly, A woman approaches them, enthusiastically examines their clothes, and calls him surprisingly interesting. The woman brings them to her store and is genuinely surprised that travelers have gone on the road at all without money. She notes, "Nowadays, if you do not have a penny, it is easy to stay with nothing. It cannot be easy to survive." The woman draws attention to the fact that Neato's clothes are well contaminated. Smiling, she proposes to share these things with joy for new ones, and still promises to pick up something pretty for the girl. Neato sincerely admits that their clothes are in a very pathetic condition, but the woman reassures, they say, "You should not worry." She explains that these things are made of exquisite and extremely expensive material, so throwing them away is a real waste. Neato is genuinely surprised to know that his school uniform is so expensive. However, he gladly accepts the offer of shop owners to exchange her for new clothes. The woman looks at the clothes and is interested in what class it belongs to, assuming that he is probably a warrior or a hunter. However, the guy calmly denies. He calls himself an ordinary healer. She looks at him confusedly, and Neato sighs and replies, "It's a long story." The woman decides not to ask him anymore. It extends him a small bag, explaining that it is convenient to store a variety of elixirs and healing herbs. Nino is wondered if the healer has the ability to use medicinal herbs, and the seller is surprised that it had to be guessed for a long time. The woman explains that since healers can use only weak healing magic, no one forbids them to add foreign substances to enhance the effect of spell. The seller is interested in what class it belongs to, and Neato is surprised whether he has not yet looked into her status. The girl replies that she is a paladin, and these words cause a woman to be a real surprise. Toa opens its characteristics, and Neato is interested in who the paladins are. The woman explains that people still call them magical swords. She explains that the peculiarity of paladins is their ability to master the sword and magic skillfully, as well as the ability to combine these skills in battle. She clarifies that then it belongs to the race of demons, and at that moment he was mentioned as the king told about the eternal war of his country with demons. It was because of this that the monarch called heroes from another world. Neato is interested in who the demons are, and the seller, in amazement, asks whether the guy knows something at all. She replies that her knowledge of the demonic race is limited. The only thing she knows is their great power due to the huge reserves of magical energy, as well as the fact that these creatures live in the outskirts of the large forest. She thinks of what circumstances they have erected, calling it an unusual combination. Neato with Toe dresses in new clothes. The woman looks at them enthusiastically and notes how much these outfits are. The hostess of the shop gives Talia a sword, and Neato sincerely thanks her for all these gifts. However, the woman insists. Even with these purchases, they spent less than they paid for their clothes. She gives the rest of money and decides to share with Neato one important advice. She notes that although everything will be well in this country, it is not necessary to cherish unnecessary illusions. They do not take open arms everywhere. In addition, then it will certainly differ against the background of others because of its extraordinary magical power. She insists. If he is a real man, he will not allow anyone to harm Toe. Neato looks at the Toho and thinks. Even in this world, bias continues, because people are not able to accept what cannot be grasped. He assures that this issue is necessarily relevant. The woman escorts Neato and Toa, called Sharon, and warmly invites them to visit her when they want. They are sitting in the city, and Neato, looking carefully at it, confesses that he could not even imagine fate will give him a meeting with such a special person. He realized that its level is much higher than the indicators of guild adventurers, because they are unlikely to reach even the 17th level, and the strongest was barely achieved by the 23rd. But he suddenly changes the topic, because he is interested in quite another. He asks Toa if she has a question about his current situation, or perhaps she would like to see him. The girl easily replies that she has already looked into his status. Neato mentions it and is interested in her opinion on her status. She with a smile replies that it seems quite exciting. She notes that his condition is difficult to describe differently than as abnormal. Neato is upset that even in the opinion of demons, it seems a munning. Neato is surprised how such a powerful warrior could fall into the trap of pathetic robbers, because she could deal with them in a matter of moments. The girl timidly replies that she was just scared. Her words are not surprisingly. He is interested in where she was before she was in the forest. The girl calmly replies that she was in her castle, and it is stunning him. The guy tries to guess who she really is, assuming that before him, a princess or some particularly significant figure in the world of demons. He wondered what she was doing in the castle, to which she briefly answered that nothing special. Toa tells that in the morning she practiced in witchcraft and fencing, and then, together with her parents, waited for her sister to return till late evening. Expecting something, she liked to play with a wonderful chest or tied cheerful conversations with the mischievous pixie who lived in the garden. Listening to her story, Neato concludes that she had never stepped beyond her castle. She was strictly forbidden to go outside. He realizes that she, as well as himself, was just afraid of everything around. This unknown world and new people who happened in her way. Soon, the depth of the forest illuminated the bright light of magic. Meanwhile, Neato came together in a melee with a small green goblin, cleverly attacking the enemy. A little time passed, and Neato came out of the forest, where the bodies of the killed demons lay near them. Neato noted that the obtained would be enough to pay for the night in the courtyard. The girl carefully pulled her teeth from Goblin's jaw and folded them to the purse. Neato asked Toa if it was true that after the murder of the monster, his body remains material and eventually decomposed. He confessed that he had previously believed that after death, the remains of creatures were simply disappearing from this world. The girl explained that this happens only in the dungeons. Outside them, the body is not disappearing anywhere and staying in the open. In addition, she added, Goblin is still monsters, not Mamina. Hearing this, Neato wondered how Mania differs from the goblins. Toya said that mothers have a mind and are able to communicate in human language, while monsters are completely different creatures. Neato mentioned the servant of the serpent and realized he then met not a monster, but a mother, because he was talking effortlessly like a man. For a while, Neato, along with Toa, returned to the Adventurers Guild to hand over the task. The girl at the registration rack confirmed the task of eliminating 10 goblins and gave Neato a well-deserved reward. The young man notices how Toei near him awkwardly yawns. Turning to her, he says it was quite grueling, so they should look for a tricky yard to rest. The girl on the receipt unfolds in front of Neato and Toa's map of the city and suggests showing several hotels if they are looking for where to stay. Neato sincerely thanks for his courtesy. At that moment, a stranger suddenly approaches to Toa and addresses her. Young lady. In front of her put a man in a gorgeous outfit. Putting his palm on his chest, he bowed respectfully, and then, slightly smiling, asked her name. Neato stood between them, apologized and explained that the girl was traveling with him. The man threw an annoyed look at the guy. He noted that he had never seen him here before, and then wondered if he was accidentally seeking adventure. Neato replied that he was really an adventurer, and today went on a journey. Hearing that the young man in front of him is a beginner, the man holds his hand in his hair. Now it is clear why he did not recognize him. He proudly raises his head and asks Neato with the call whether their path began with the murder of some pathetic goblins. Neato, in the meantime, thinks of surprise whether these people like to listen to other people's conversations. Neato, hovering the nape of the nape, recognizes that this is a true truth. The life of an adventure seeker is full of difficulties. Meanwhile, the man is surprised. Why the young man is justified because the lower-level tasks will still not bring them a lot of earnings. Neato, with a calm look, replies that nothing special has happened, and advises the man not to worry. But the interlocutor, suddenly indignant, and sharply raises his voice, saying he addressed his replica not to him, but to the lady nearby, and let the new moon be silent. He then adds that if the TOA becomes a companion on the road, then he will no longer pose a threat to either goblins, wolves, no huge snakes, or even bears. He also points out that he was a witness to the quarrel between Neato, then, and some man at noon. After that, he adds that Neato was a healer, and asked if he really was. He clarifies that the journey of Neato seems to be over, barely having time to start, so he has no doubt. The young man will probably stop at some inexpensive hotel. He gently puts his hand on his shoulder, and asks if she goes with him. After all, he is able to give her much more. I am convinced that he will be able to satisfy her desire much better than this guy. Neato is felt, feeling that the words of this man have a special meaning, but decides not to worry about it. He calls Toa, trying to push her to the exit, but the girl remains indifferent and does not pay attention to his words. Suddenly she calls for light magic, directing her powerful flow simply to that insidious scoundrel. It took a while, and he lost consciousness. All his things were burned, and his hair was sticking out. People around surprised watching what was happening. She looked at him with a sense of disgust. The young man turns to the girl, and she suddenly turns to him. She gently takes him by the hand and calls for herself. Meanwhile, the man remained unconscious, spreading on the floor. The girl slid quickly with the narrow streets of the city, and Neato barely had time for her, constantly begging to stop at least for a moment. Suddenly the girl stopped sharply. She wondered why Neato did not respond to her husband. because he could boldly repel thanks to her strength. Neato wondered why he did so, and then added that it was clear that he should not worry about this person. That is why Neato decided not to pay attention to him and escaped a vain bustle. He also emphasizes that the moments of discomfort and unpleasant circumstances should be bypassed if it is possible. Thoa firmly grabbed the edge of the hem of her skirt, turned, and with seriousness in her voice stated that Neato should not be worried at all. She did not get tired of assuring that the words of the man did not touch the boy at all, because he just laughed in response. Toa made it up that it was quite unpleasant. Neato lowered his gaze and felt true pain and rage, but understood that now is not the time or a place for candid emotional outbreaks. However then, without hesitation, she applied her magic for him, although they just met and knew almost nothing about each other. He apologized to the girl, and in his head he had the idea. Revenge is not the main thing in life. This idea of lightning flashed in his mind at the moment. You thank the girl for not afraid to express her indignation. Neato promised that the next time he would try to show determination, but remembered that healers did not seem to be aggressive. It is better to avoid such situations and find common ground with words. Toa, wiping tears, nodded, they say. She understood everything. Having mastered herself, the girl noted that it was because of this that the Asaman would be annoyed. Neato tried to find out if she understood at least something of their newly completed conversation. In some way, he managed to make a mysterious connection in this world. So after having a revenge on Neato, a completely new life will expect. He changes his views. For the first time, he seems to have finally found salvation, not only for himself but also for Toa. Subsequently, when the night was descended, Neato and Toa were located in a cozy local tavern. In front of them on the table soup, mouth-watering salad, and plate with meat. Excerpts of conversations came from all sides. Someone was fond of the taste of dishes, and somewhere nearby they were vigorously discussed the monsters. During the meal, Neato and Toa also started a conversation. Neato suggested that the girl probably tasted all these dishes before, but then she corrected him. In fact, she never even tried anything like that. Neato wondered in surprise what a girl fed in the castle. Toa replied that she almost did not remember. She ate what she was served. And from her mother she heard only one thing. All the food was special, because she had to strengthen her magical abilities. The more Neato learned about her, the more he was absorbed by his curiosity. He realized that he would certainly have to visit the possessions of the demons, and the dwellings of Twajakis were located somewhere among the spaces of the steppe. The girl tastes the dish, and admires that this food will undoubtedly make her stronger than everything she has tasted earlier. To eat so exquisite meat again, she will have to try well. Neato rejoiced when she really liked the dish. He addresses her with a proposal. What will you say if I give you another task for tomorrow? Who knows, maybe the next award. The girl gladly replies that he does not mind. On the contrary, she is only 4. Somewhere after dinner, Toa plunged into a warm bath, allowing herself to rest. When she came out of the bathroom, Neato, who patiently expected her, said with a smile how lucky they were. Not everyone could stop in such a prestigious, always crowded hotel. Toa eagerly agreed with him, sharing this admiration. Neato pushes the table and insists that he will spend the night on the floor, leaving a bed. But the girl is surprised. Why not spend the night together, but on different sides of the bed? This remark is surprised by Neato. The girl lay on the bed and called Neato too, they say, to sleep on the floor, to catch a long time. The guy hesitantly hesitated, stuttering. Explained that in his sleep he often turned and could interfere. The girl corrects the pillow, and with a smile notes that she is indifferent, because she fully trusts Masamune. The guy is interested in asking what she means when he talks about that trust. The girl is already covered with a blanket, and then she looks at Neato, which is still standing nearby, and asks if he really is not going to sleep. The young man only briefly replies that he will rest. Toa has already managed to hide under the blanket and wish Neato good night. The guy, stuttering, answered him. The night was already in full swing. Neato realized that the dream went around him. Toa turned to him and asked if he was sleeping. Neato replied that he did not do not sleep, but just woke up. Toa continued her story, confessing that she always remained alone in that castle. The parents appeared at home only late at night, and the sister stopped returning. The only pixie she could talk to. She was daily unbearable loneliness. But now loneliness has remained in the past, because it is now Neato now. The girl hugs the nitrate behind, gently pressed against him, and whispers the wishes for good night. The guy is finally relaxing. He answers her and, feeling calm, soon falls asleep. The next morning, Nito's room was knocked on the room of the room. He turns out, still sleepy, and asks in the layers that she needs in the morning. The girl in response points out that she was already noon outside. Neato is interested in how the layer found it. The girl replies what she learned about it in the guild. She explains. At first she thought that she would like to teach a guy fencing. From the room, a voice of Toho, who was interested in asking what happened here. It rotates to report the arrival of the layer. But he does not have time to agree as she notices two, dressed in candid clothes. He began to wipe the dirty hands and asked why the girl was so dressed, but she replied that it was hot at night. Meanwhile, the layer did not joke and arranged Neato a real tin. The whole hotel engulfed the fuss. Toho wondered what was the massacre, and the young man hurried to assure the layer that all this was just an unfortunate misunderstanding. The girl was already calling the light, but Neato rushed to rest her. The layer confessed that she was deeply sorry. She was too hurried with the conclusions. She does not understand why in this country everyone is used to solving problems by force, and therefore apologizes for her behavior last night. Neato glances to Taa asking him to stop. He explains that even if then continues to beat him, he will still not get any more. The layer is amazed and asks what Neato meant. The girl confessed that she heard earlier how she called Neato Masamune. The unexpected tremor was covered by the herd. The guy explained that Neato was just a fictional name, but asked him to call Nita in people. The layer agreed to it. Neato was worried that it could safely say his real name, so he decided to warn her, in communication with others, to be more careful and carefully monitored in his own words. Shira notes that the Masamune is quite unusual. She adds that this is not his real name in Gukok. Neato is again interested in how he really is called. The girl tells that they say that this country is located at the opposite end of the continent of Bath. She also heard that the residents of the local were like Naito-like names. The guy immediately thinks that he will definitely have to go there. Then the girl wondered if the young man had any plans for today, because she was just intention to teach him fencing. The young man explained that he decided to take the task from the guild because he needed money. The girl is wondering if she will allow her to join Neato and Toa. She claims that they can come in handy. If they take it with them, they will get a chance to take up a more difficult task. In addition, the remuneration will be much greater. Neato agrees. If a girl wants to join, he does not deny. Shire drives everyone, demanding to hurry. Subsequently, in the Guild of Adventure, Chair said that there is a special system of ranks for adventure seekers that reflects their achievements. At the lowest step stands Class F, and the highest position is occupied by the prestigious SSS class. At present, NDL and TOA can only perform level E tasks. However, if they are joined by a layer, they will be able to take on level A and even higher missions. Neato wondered if the layer was also an adventurer. The girl smiled mysteriously and replied that in this country everyone became a seeker of adventure. In addition, in this country every knight must be registered with adventurers. Therefore, all local knights are at the same time adventurers. Nino has wondered if it is common for shuggers to appear in a guild twice a week, because the white knights of the king should remain in the shade. Shura replies that everything is fine, because only the selected know who it really is. She's not only a brave knight, but also a bold adventure founder. The group approaches the bulletin board, and the layer is interested in what the task will choose from the TOA. The entire board is literally littered with orders that are specifically selected for Neato. Neato looks at the board and thinks, whatever the layer is, it will not help. He is still unable to understand any inscription. Even the goblins were given a registrar. He looks at the image of some monster and asks what the monster is. Sir confidently states that his name is Klein. It is a giant creature with a couple of powerful horns, which lives in the depths of the forest. He decides to accept the task. The layer, meanwhile, adds that after its execution, she would like to look into the store for a short time. After completing the calculation, the layer together with Neato and Toa go to the store. The girl, after the counter, seeing a familiar visitor and face of the layer, is surprised to ask if she is really a day off today. At this point, the Niddle appears and listens to the layer telling them that they go to the forest on Cleam. So, she said, it will not hurt to replenish the medication in Catherine. The young man asks what the girl is talking about. This layer replies that these medicines are intended to protect his hearing, because the voice of clients is capable of shaking the body, which is why such a measure is necessary. The saleswoman approaches the company unexpectedly, looks carefully, and recognizes Neato. At the same time, the paladin is surprised to round out the eyes, and then shouts that, then it is actually Paladin. The saleswoman immediately realized that she made a serious mistake. After a while, everyone was at the entrance to the forest. The layer again emphasizes that the then is paladin. Neato does not refrain from the question why the girl is so concerned about it. Neato was well aware that in the whole kingdom, only one other person owned this class. Even among the royal white knights, such a rare specialization almost did not happen. So to find out that Atoa belongs to this class, it became a real surprise for her. Neato is amazed at how the layer can so calmly share with him all these details, and asks if it is really normal. Neato understands that introducing this girl to her real name was an ill-considered step. Some time has passed, and they were already far in the depths of the forest. Before them is a group of heavy people. The layer with anxiety asks if everything is fine with them. Looking at them, she asks what happened to these people. One of the men tells that they moved to the forest in search of orcs. At first, everything went well. An ordinary familiar forest, nothing unusual. Suddenly, the goblins, orcs, and wolves swept away and rushed to the side, as if they were scared of something more scared than themselves. He explained that they had to return it just then because it was Klein. His team recognized him, but something was wrong with him. Neato wondered what he was in mind. Strange. The man claimed that he shines with the whole body. Another noted, he is well versed in ordinary clients, but this, of course, not of them. The layer asks in detail about the Klein, noting that it was shrunken. The man asks in surprise, he really looked like this? In these words, the facial expression of the layer changes significantly. Suddenly, the forest pierced a terrible cry. The wounded adventure seekers claimed that this monster was persecuting them. Suddenly, a terrible monster jumped out of the trees. The layer shouted loudly to the wounded adventurers that would hold back the enemy, and they need to run away from here. The enthusiast is smiling and asks if it is indeed Klein. However, the layer, with trembling hands, by opening a bottle with liquid, says it is not a claw. She assures that she had already explained the boy about different levels of difficulty. Monsters also have their gradations. The task of destroying Klein was rank A, because Klein himself belongs to the monsters of the category B. However, due to the special ability to own voice and dangerous luck, some creatures are called binding and referred to as monks of Class A. It is in front of them now stands the same monster, which is usually left especially dangerous. The layer is interested in Neato, and then how they are doing. Neato replies that feels good, and then also confirms that everything is fine with him. Such restraint of both surprises the layer. She looks at her trembling hands with fear and confesses. The voice of this man stunned her so much that the flux of man inside seemed to crumble into friends. She remembers how Neato dealt with the robber, and assured that if something went wrong, she should rely on him. Then she saw him only for a moment, but this short meeting made a great impression. Neato looks carefully at a creature named Nat Klein, whose level barely reached 32nd. It became clear immediately, it is too simple and weak opponent. Growing the point, the guy turns to the layer and confidently states that he understood everything. After that, Neato asks him to entrust him all the further business. He turns to Toa, relying on her help. The girl nods in response, assuring that she was well understood. She shakes his sword with trembling hands, and collecting the remains of courage, is attacking. It causes an icy flash and skillfully wields a large sword of pure ice. She thinks whether Newt Klein is vulnerable to weapons. Suddenly she thinks, it's time to test it in practice. Suddenly the attack is in vain. There is no scratch on the monster. From the powerful blow of the sheriff, he rushes to the side. In response, the monster fiercely rushes to the girl, waving her heavy paw. But Cher is undoubtedly evading the impact. The monster is rapidly approaching the girl. But Toe has already prepared a trap for him, a magical seal. As soon as the monster comes to her, the girl activates her bright witchcraft. It seems that no sorcery does not work on the monster. Cheris recalls that she heard that these wardrus are managing magical particles with her horns. Toei notes that it feels the presence of magical particles around. The layer claims that first it is necessary to crush his horns, and suddenly Neato notices a mysterious radiance, and without spending time, shouts everyone back. Nut Klein disrupts a powerful spell, and a huge piece of land disappears without a trace under its devastating blow. The layer, barely managed to dodge, looks at the bright outbreak of magic and fades the deep pothole, a trace that left the light of light on the ground. Nut Klein starts to tremble. It looks like he is about to fight again. But then, it is loudly exclaiming that it will not allow him to take a step, and strongly extends his hands forward. sparks sparkling on her palms, and it causes an extremely powerful spell. The layer immediately recognizes this spell as the magic of the two elements. At the same time, To says its name and shouts loudly, "The howling of light." As soon as these words break from her mouth, a powerful ray creates from her seals, as if the very essence of light comes to life in this attack. The monster confidently reflects the attack of Toa. The girl in despair exclaims that it is impossible. The fear-covered layer notes that during this time they have not caused him any harm. Neato understands that they are not solved by a rough force of their problem. If the magical particles are managed, its attacks will undoubtedly have a magical color. Probably, the secret of his invulnerability lies in some trick, such as his reception, Destroyer of Souls. Neato notes that when the beam was shot, some of the light around the nut climb disappeared. And when he opens the device again, the layer asks with interest, what happens if accidentally gets under this ray? Neato states that in this case, he will go. The layer also proposes to use it as a bait. But the guy reassures, they say, everything is under control. You only need to put the land as soon as possible. Instantly, without having time and blinking his eye, he finds himself just above the very head of the monster. He uses the magic of the soul rupture. He then grabs the roasted horns and with the force of his force, the monster cried out of despair, shrilling in torment. Neato caused the monster of incredible pain. The young man notes that he broke his horns, and therefore, now this creature will no longer be able to protect himself from the girl's blows. Then the guy voices his desire to try something new, and asks if the girl could help him. Sheer willingly agree, assuring that it does not interfere with her. The guy thanks her. Suddenly, half of his body wraps a strange shadow and a mysterious radiance. Looking at the layer, he strictly orders her to keep her today's secret. It passed for a while, and the noise from the loudspeakers announced, the clinic was noticed in the mountain forest. A glow was shimmering around it, similar to the scattering of light particles. The man who diligently recorded everything in the notepad asked the details of mysterious light particles and tried to find out who was the informant. The narrator replied that there were only 4 adventurers. All of them were injured and are now in hospital. According to them, 3 more adventurers, a man and 2 girls, now have a fierce battle with a monster. One of the girls was distinguished by silver hair and skillfully possessed a rapier. This man is the commander of the White Royal Knights, Reincarnating. Having taken away the cloak, he ordered the narrator to convey Rita and Hildy, who now competes with New Clay. 2 days ago, when the village plunged into night silence, the young man carefully studied Oliver's status. He was a master of fiery magic, and even if Neato was able to get spontaneous magic, he would still not be able to use it. Suddenly, Neato gets news. He is aware that this is extremely reminiscent of a real adventure. He unfolds the letter. The news concerned his wife Anna. It was for the sake of her that he once became a knight and gained a respected leading position. However, returning from the war, he learned the horrific truth. Anna turned into a thief and died during another theft. Despair covered him completely, and the people around began to mock. Neato realized that this message was somehow related to the murder of the king. He gently turns the letter back into the envelope, then hides it in the repository. Neato could not give himself advice. Why did this man need this assignment? He still has not answered many of his questions. Suddenly, notifications are floating on the screen. Someone purchased Hellfire. Neato was surprised that magic was so easy to master, although he was unfamiliar with such spells. This magic may not be related to the elements. He leaned against the wall of the building with an indifferent look and grunted that he could not tolerate healers. He thinks, can this spell be turned? The fire is opposed by water. Perhaps it will be the key to success. Neato decides to test his idea in practice. The screen shows notifications. The property of the reverse of the magic of God Revenge is launched. The magical hellish flame turns into magic called Bloody Tears of the Goddess. Meanwhile, the nutcase was written in pain, and Neato felt something unusual in himself, as if something inside him had turned, as if he had become another. Suddenly, the sky was a sharp crack. Toa urged everyone to lift his eyes, and it was at that moment that someone's hand stretched through the gap in heaven, and suddenly a girl with deep black eyes emerged from the darkness. The girl looked carefully at the rolling. He found himself inside the shining pillar of light and could not get out. Then the girl was flooded with black tears, and where her tears touched the monster, destroyed areas appeared on his body. Suddenly, the monster was under the rain of black rain. These were the tears of the girl. The layer was engulfed by unexpected surprise mixed with fear. Meanwhile, the monster was split and dug out, splashed around with a thick black liquid. After all, there is almost nothing left of the monster. The girl began to dissolve in the air, and her last tear turned into a flow of thick black fluid, which finally destroyed the monster. Toa asked Neato to question whether it was an end. The young man said quietly that he seems... Yes, everything was over. The black glow gradually extinguished around him, and the strange burden that squeezed the chest immediately melted. Suddenly, a deaf thud of horse hooves came from afar. The guy warns that someone is approaching, and they should disappear as soon as possible in order not to get into their eyes and not get into the mess. He turns to the layer, saying that now everything depends on her, because he does not want to be noticed. The girl is wondering what happened. Neato replies that she can tell everything she wants. He explains. He showed it for only one reason, because he trusts her. Now she decides how to dispose of it. Neato invites the girl to meet later in the capital. He will warn the owner of the hotel about the meeting place, so she will be able to find out the details and come to Neato when he is ready. Neato and Toa disappear unexpectedly. The horror layer is still watching it, and then falls on the ground and, embarrassed, thinks, "Who is the Masimon?" Reinhardt notes that according to the information received, the layer together with their comrades should be somewhere nearby. The Royal White Knight, Genus Black, confesses that he has not felt a real battle for a long time, so now he is looking forward to the opportunity to deal with the Nut Client on his own side of the sword. The Royal White Knight carefully kept Carlet, listening carefully to Reed's caustic words that her sister was dying. Suddenly Reinhardt feels like something passed him. It rotates sharply. The Genus asks in surprise what happened to him. Reinhardt, looking back and making sure that there was no one behind him, calmly stated that nothing had happened. For a while, the Genus was already standing near a giant black heap and was in surprise that it was at all. He also wondered if he should be Nutklein inside this pile. Reinhardt's gaze on a black pile, which barely visible the skeleton, and decided that it was not Keld at all. The Genus did not restrain himself and exclaimed, not believing that Reinhardt really thinks. However, the man just shrugged. They still did not have other cars. Seeing the layer, he immediately asked her question. What happened here, and is she not sometimes involved in it? The girl lay unconscious on the ground. Hilda had already leaned to her and asked how she was feeling. Reinhardt notes that according to the information received, there should be two more, a girl and a man. Shara assures that they are not here. The surprised Reinhardt asks her what it means. He claims that at least 4 White Knights will be needed to win the New Taclane, and does not believe that I can overcome it on my own. The girl is silent in response. The Genus suddenly laughed and noted that they seemed to swallow them. At least, judging by the sheriff's condition, that's exactly how it was. He immediately burns on Relia, demanding that he shuts down, but the man laughs even louder, capricating from the dimensions of Reinhardt. He then emphasizes that you need to contact the night team immediately and orders everyone else to collect things. Subsequently, Reinhardt reported that, in his opinion, in that situation, the layer won the Nutklein. However, due to its unstable condition, this failed to confirm it. He also points out that, in his opinion, he should wait for the final results. The King of the Red House and Arnold Redhouse express an understanding of the situation and convey the full confidence of the Rangardu case. After leaving the royal office, Reinhardt meets on the threshold of the White Knight of the King, Daniel King. He is wondering whether the young man managed to talk to the old weirdo. In response, Reinhardt jokingly calls Daniel eccentric. He begins to laugh and asks whether the rumor is true about a Nutklein. Reinhardt replies that this question is still being investigated. Daniel has wondered if there was something really, but Reinhardt again voices the same answer. The investigation is ongoing. Daniel with despair with his hands, asking if Reinhardt really can reveal anything. But the young man only sighs helplessly in response. He knows nothing. The layer was side by side. So if Daniel is interested in it, let him just talk to her or Nat Clinic and reveal his intentions. Then everything will open to him later. Daniel smiles mysteriously, and Reinhardt does not understand the reasons for this. Then the man confesses that Reinhardt has known for a long time, and he is interested. Did not notice the suspicious. Reinhardt reports that according to the available information, 3 were fought with Nat Klein, but only the layer was found in place. When they arrived, the rest had already disappeared. Reinhardt notes that Nutklein, more precisely his dead bodily residue, has been mutilated so much that Daniel would never be able to find out who actually overcome it, not to mention those rivers of black blood. Daniel suddenly realizes that all answers are hidden in twins. Reinhardt only shrugs. Quite possible. She knows exactly what happened and for unclear reasons prefers to remain silent. Daniel proposes that Reinhardt interrogates her, but he quietly denies. They say she is not going to unwrite what she does not want to talk about. Daniel suggests that if the two were able to overcome the obeyment, then they are undoubtedly extraordinary, and may be compared to them by force. Reinhardt goes even further, stating that these strangers probably even surpass them. Daniel laughed loudly, stating it was simply unrealistic. He was in distrust of whether Reinhardt really believed that these two surpass him by force. To which the man just shrugged and replied that he was not sure. However, if they are a threat to the country, then the layer that has taken them to protect them should be ready to accept all the consequences. He adds that he wants to understand who they are for them, enemies or allies. Meanwhile, then with a bitter irony, he remembers the abusive answer and claims that healers do not seek elementary magic. Neato adds that now it would be most appropriate to make this witchcraft. In the end, even the naked, he effortlessly broke the horns of the Nutclin. Toa gently takes his hands and assures that everything will be fine. If he does not want to use his abilities, he does not trouble, because she will do his best to protect it using his own power. Neato thanks the girl, and then confesses that he has long wanted to ask one question. He asks, when they first met, why did she decide to believe him? Toa was already going to talk, but Shira suddenly distracted their attention. The guy promises to tell her everything next time, and the girl agrees. Meanwhile, the layer asks whether she did not prevent Neato and Neato, but Neato reassures her. They say, it is not necessary to worry. He also apologizes to the layer for having to overcome such a long distance. The girl warns Neato, today it is better not to stand out. He isn't surprised to ask why. The girl reports that white knights were taken away. She is not even made ahead of Neato and Toa, so it seems that nothing threatens to them, although no one can give any guarantees. Neato sincerely thanks the girl for his help. Nino is wondered if they can receive the reward, because the initial task was to curb the usual monster of clay. The layer carefully points out that it is better to refrain from this idea, the risk of being too large, so you should leave everything as is. Sheer just began to ask any question how suddenly another figure appeared nearby, interrupting it into half a word. The girl wondered why he was here, but the man only noted that the great power had turned the chickmest into the farm. He added that having such power in his hands is extremely cool. His face was raging. He demanded to admit which of the two attendees had snatched his prey. When the injured adventure seekers told all the goalkeepers, the Royal White Knights rushed to the battlefield without hesitation. But when they got places, the horns of the bull were broken for a long time, and only the bloody meat was left out of the very monster, which splashed everything around with thick, dark blood. Usually, the inferior, insensitive to magic, can only die from a normal physical attack. But there is no doubt. All this mess is undoubtedly caused by sorcery. Usually the horns of nut clients are so strong that it is almost impossible to break them. However, something does not happen in this, because no matter what side, the way of killing is surprisingly cruel. The battlefield is transformed into real chaos. The ability to easily kill the sacred beast, as if it was an ordinary monster, was that the genus could not leave. Neato summarizes. The knights immediately suspected the layer, so they followed it. The genus confirms. They say, Neato hit the target. Cherie was angry that Neato and Toa were her friends, and they were no enemies. The genus replied cold that this question was not solved by her. Then he broke out of place, jumped up and stated that he had the right of decision. Suddenly, Reinhardt, who was in his office, glanced out the window. He clearly felt the magical energy of Reed. He immediately guessed that something unusual happened. Suddenly before Neato appeared Toe. The genus did not hide the surprise. The girl cleverly intercepted his blow to the very last moment. Interested, he asked who she was. In response, she confidently called her name. Toa Turk. So she is the one that took her life in a late life? The genus exploded with laughing, not ceasing to repeat that she had killed him. He exclaimed that incredibly, an ordinary woman could have caused such chaos. He carefully examines Neato and notes that he does not feel any magical energy from this young man. Instead, the powerful, incredible force of witchcraft. He pours on a girl with new vigor, full of fierce and determination. The girl assures that everything is fine with her, so the Masimon should remain behind her back. The unexpected genus comes to her very close and asks if there is a minute to look back. The girl skillfully reflects his attack and speaks. The genius, with curiosity, notes that it reminds him of someone who can get rid of this client. Nevertheless, he considers all current actions in vain, because he decides to immediately play his main trump card. The genius puts on fire armor. He runs up to Toe and announces that time to start a second round. Yes, then they should not assume that the next attack will be identical to the previous one. Suddenly, he cautiously touches her cheeks. Neato calls her, but then she assures that everything is fine with her. The genius is interested in what happened, and then with irony adds that with such a regular saber, the girl will not be able to restrain even his light sigh. He asks the girl to show magic and put on the full. She replies to this, which has already shown everything she is capable of. The genius is negligently ticking his tongue and exclaiming that if he is gone, he will deal with her right now. Suddenly, Reinhardt is lightning between them. He immediately stops the attack by both Toe and Relia at the same time. The genius is outraged, demanding explanations. Why did Reinhardt prevented him? Reinhardt states that this case is now under control, and then it is terrible in Reed, what he is going to do next. Neato radiates a healing aura, healing the wounded Toa. Smiling, he notes with relief. There is no hint on the face. The girl thanks him sincerely. He asks why the girl did not take advantage of magic, because he was sure that she would not be defeated. But in response, the girl sighs and confesses. She could not afford it, because the use of magic would destroy everything around. The genius reports that it was the one who killed the Nutclin. Reinhardt asks as a surprise, "And what about that?" Then the genius, without holding back emotions, explodes, and in despair asks what is wrong with Reinhardt. Reinhardt notes that the murder of Tonut Klein does not make her an enemy. She just completed the condition of the task. She got rid of the monster, as it was said in an assignment. The genius is questioned why she escaped then. Does it indicate that she has something to hide? In addition, he throws an image against Reinhardt, calling him a great fool. The genius is interested in Neato whether he really used healing magic. He also asks the guy whether he is a reaper. Neato only answers that he is a healer. The genius explodes laughing and notes. It is not surprising that he felt nothing from Neato. In the end, the guy is just another worthwhile healer. The genius will continue loudly. He turns to Toe and disrespectfully states that her team consists only of worthless losers. Neato remembers Sakea and catches himself thinking that the genius reminds him very much. Reinhardt stops Neato and thinks about Reed's words. He said that he feels nothing from this young man at all. He looks at Neato, and something in it causes true horror. He has not believed in what he saw. It is simply impossible. It turns to Neato, but it already stands and erupts him. The man states that if Reinhardt refuses to take this case, then let it be kind and just move away. The genius points out that he is indifferent who is his opponent, a person or something else. Seeing a strong enemy, it is better to remove it immediately until he became even more powerful. It swings to Neato and Toa, but then suddenly Reinhardt sounds loudly, demanding that he stop immediately. Suddenly a powerful explosion is heard. A thick layer of dust is blown around. Reinhardt notices under his feet an unharmed Spitz, and next to her, an exhausted and unconscious enemy who lies without signs of life. Reinhardt states that it is now clear it was Neato killed that client. They stood in the midst of a huge gun created by Neato. Shea prefers loudly, begging Reinhardt not to approach Masimon. Reinhardt was quite impressed with how far the Toei and the So were. It turned out that Neato simultaneously sent the girls to a safe place and struck the Rita. The layer urged Reinhardt to lower the sword, because Masamune only tried to protect the Toa. Reinhardt was surprised to realize that he unconsciously grabbed the blade in a moment of the explosion. He apologizes to Neato, confessing that he was a little impressed. Neato is wondering whether Reinhardt really guessed that he became the killer Nata Klein. The man in response notes that the genius mentioned that she did not feel any emotions next to this guy. However, this is not possible. Magic awakens in man from birth. Even if it is quite a little, knights are still able to feel it in anyone. However, Reinhardt approaches the guy, lenses, and adds that there are exceptions when someone's magical power far exceeds his own. In other words, Neato has an incredible stock of magical power, so giant that even Reinhardt and Genius are not able to see it. Reinhardt sincerely apologizes that he has not been able to restrain the Reed, and assures that he would bear all responsibility for it. Neato only waves with a smile. They say, "You should not worry. Let everything remain in the past." He explains that their true goal is not to stand out among others. He and then seek to take up ordinary guild tasks and receive a reward as simple adventurers. All they want is a calm, unnoticeable life. Reinhardt promises that Neato and then will receive a reward for winning the Nutcree, and he will not tell anyone about the story with the Dipe. However, he will still have to report to the king. So Reinhardt suggests that Neato and Toa have helped to cope with the client killer, and advises Neato to move in this direction. The young man is aware that Reinhardt can be trusted, and agrees that such a development would be great. Reinhardt raises the unconscious Raid, and says it's time to go. Before leaving, he is interested in the name of Masamune, and apologizes for the hassle. Finally, he proposes to meet again in the future. Over some time, Neato finally realizes he still managed to do it. Even if Tai was restrained throughout the duel, everything was spoiled. Who could imagine that only one of his blow would make such a loud fuss? He hopes that they do not have to take the tile repair. Subsequently, Daniel meets Reinhardt and notes that today, the city is buzzing from rumors about this weird elderly man. Reinhardt also asks him if it was possible to understand something from this story. Daniel tells that this bizarre climb resembled nuts only remotely when they first came across it. I had to work a lot to return the monster to its true appearance. The most amazing thing is that it was absolutely empty inside. Reinhardt is interested in curiosity what Daniel means. Daniel tells that when the pathologists noticed his unusually lean physique, they were surprised. There are no organs inside. The whole thing leads to a single conclusion. It was dead from the beginning. Reinhardt and Daniel conclude that the backstage is an invisible director who secretly manages all events as a puppet with his puppets. Daniel also notes that sacred animals are actually distorted monsters, so he still has not heard that someone can control them. The man has no idea what purpose the enemy wants, but he is convinced that they will not stop. Therefore, they should inspect this forest as soon as possible. Reinhardt agrees with this. Reinhardt announces that Daniel appoints the leader of the research group, and then asks if he will be able to cope with new responsibilities. Daniel confidently replies that he can cope. At the same time, Reinhardt covers a strange, almost incomprehensible feeling. The kingdom is inevitably approaching an unknown threat. Since Neato and Toa did not have a penny, they decided to accept the invitation of the lair. That's how they found themselves in the family estate of the Akarat family. It passes for a while, and finally they all get at the table. Neato notes that he realized Lair is a real nobleman. Recognizing the girl denies him, saying that he is a real knight, and she cannot be called a noble young lady. The man who was sitting nearby returned to the young man, and surprised that he did not even hope to meet him so early. The man was the father of the lair, Brown Ekerort. He explained that the lair was told about him the day before, so he had a desire to see a person who had fallen into her heart at least once in his life. The mother, Maria Eckerkurg, was in surprise whether the Masimon was really so strong. She recalled that she heard about how this young man saved the boy from the village of Tanya. Neato rotates, and the lair turns away immediately. The guy is surprised to think whether she can at least sometimes keep his tongue. Suddenly the door opens, and the sister of the lair, Gilda, comes to the dining room. The girl reports that she has already returned home. Mom immediately explains that Neato and Toa are guests whom the lair invited as her friends. Hilda with a smile is presented by his older sister Lair and says that I am genuinely glad. Neato blushes instantly, but at the same moment he catches a careful, insightful look of Toa. Hilda sincerely thanks Neato for he came to the aid of Shiris in the village of Tanya. She also notes that today this young man came to her help. Neato tries to understand whether the girl really does not mean, and in general, where she knows it all. Suddenly the young man recalls this girl. She was then near Reinhardt, when Neato, along with Toa, hid away from the murder of the assassination. Suddenly, a lair intervenes in their conversation and reports that her sister Hilda also belongs to the Royal White Knights, as well as she herself. Neato thinks whether all Royal White Knights from noble families, like Ekerot family, do not come. Neato notes that both sisters serve the country and are part of the ranks of the White Knights of the King. For him, it was quite predictable. Hilda adds with a smile that the White King just had several vacancies. Neato nods, making it clear that he understood everything. And then she is interested. Can the Lair and the Hilda be considered true heroines? Hilda says that, like a Lair, mastered the art of fencing from an early age, and later gained the title of Kingdom Knight. Only many years later, their dedication was marked by choosing White Royal Knights. However, the path of the White Knights commander is significantly different from the fate of the guilds and lairs. Reinhardt himself, at the age of only 12 years, personally elected the White King. Such a person really deserves the title of prodigy, because his ability is a genius in its purest form. The girl smiles and notes that the Masamune is a completely different level. The young man was red, thinking about how much this girl knows. The layer suddenly breaks on his feet and stops his sister, shouting so that he stops looking at him. She also casts a harsh look at Neato, preventing him from being careful. The layer jokingly points out that Hilda will never let go of the man who interested her because, they say, she is a chip like a snake. Hilda points out that the layer is probably jokes, because she is a model older sister. Then Hilda is wondering if he is suddenly her boyfriend. To which the layer replies, they say, it has nothing to do with the case. He is her boyfriend or not. Hilda smiles and suggests that he responds directly to him, after which he asks the boy what he thinks about the layer. The girl at this moment begins to become awkward. The girl assures that there is no romantic relationship between Layer and Neato. The layer is outraged. Why to break this topic at all? Meanwhile, Neato thinks about himself. In fact, they just get along well and nothing more. Suddenly, To puts a bunch of empty bottles of wine on the table with a roar. Neato, stunned, looks around. Did To drink everything herself? The girl, barely holding back a smile, returns to the layer and says that she has something important to tell her. She states that Masamune is her property. Neato, exclaiming, turns to Toa. He orders immediately to stop, because it is extremely dangerous, and persistently advises her to sit. He is wondering how much she drank. Hilda laughs, noticing that the layers seem to have a rival, but the girl exclaims that it is inappropriate now. That's fainting, and Gil just smiles at them. After a while, Neato puts To sleep. Shira notes that her sister is a very good person, and immediately apologizes that she allowed herself. The girl adds that immediately after dating, for unknown reasons, only Neato was trusted. The guy confesses that he was not interested in why it happened, but he would definitely find out, because he himself wants to know the truth. He promises to ask again about it. The layer adds that when Neato knows the answer, be sure to tell her. The young man agrees. Then the layer runs anywhere in his room. This girl does not leave his head. Then the layer is wondering whether the young man has free time tomorrow, because the next day she can teach him the art of fencing. Naito said that because of the lack of money, he should take some task in the Adventurers Guild, but he still hopes to rely on the layer. He finally agrees to spend tomorrow under her supervision. The girl happily reported that they would see tomorrow. Then Neato noticed. Sheer is able to make very funny grimaces. Suddenly, Hilda silently sneaks to him, and is surprised to say that she did not expect such a turn of events. Neato sharply retreats back and asks what this girl does here. Hilda, in response, says that just accidentally passed. Then she is wondering if the boy really managed to overcome Reed. Nita notes that it seems that that's what happened last time. Hilda asks whether all this is really done for ATOA. She confesses that she has already heard a lot, but still does not understand what relationships are associated with Neato and Toa. But watching her, it is immediately noticeable that then it does not remain indifferent to Neato, like Neato himself. The young man begins to become awkward, and notes that, in his opinion, not everything is as clearly as it may seem. Milda suggests, what, how to bring a shear with you? The girl notes that the layer for the first time showed interest in her husband, and for the first time brought home someone so close. With sadness in the eyes of Hilda, notes that the layer is now more serious than ever before, and in the world everything has changed around them. Once she almost did not allow anyone to stand as if she were standing away, preventing anyone from getting closer. So, when does it go to leave the kingdom? Why not take the layer with him? Only the art of the sword existed for her, and even before he realized, the layer has already gained the title of Knight of the Royal Guard. It is strange and unfortunate, because there is so much in the world, except just a steel blade. Neato says he is indifferent, but the layer herself has a different opinion. Hilda advises the boy not to interfere right now. Let him wait and ask him immediately before leaving. If he receives a refusal, she insists, let him take it by force. Melissa sadly hopes that she once realized, so it was really better for her. Wishing each other good night, they diverge, everyone in their direction. The next morning, the Masima does not open his eyes and feels an invisible movement. He stops his gaze and notices a toe who greets him gentle good morning. The guy welcomes the girl on a good morning and then wonder why she was in his room. The girl in response explains that she saw no one nearby. The girl looks carefully at the boy and asks if he really denies it. Masamune calmly replies that he does not mind. Suddenly, she breaks into the young man's room, shouting that he had just listened to his words. Masamune, with a frightened face, is uncertainly welcome on a good morning. The half-naked Toa also nods the girl in response. The layer sighs, agreeing that Masamune is still a man, so you won't be. However, she asks him to hold back at least a little in such a situation. Meanwhile, Hilda, having fun, stands at the door. She runs a confused toe to the right room. It passed for a while, and Masamune began to master the art of fencing under the mentoring of the shear. The girl notes that it is too early, but suggests a small pause. The guy agrees with delight, the idea to him. Masamune thinks that to master the art of fencing is much more complicated than he imagined. At first it seemed that it could be mastered without unnecessary effort, but now he doubted whether he would be able to teach others at all. He is interested in layers when she started training with her sword. The girl thinks thoughtfully, and replies that it happened in about 3 years. Then she practiced with a wooden sword. However, as soon as her abilities were noticed, everything in her life has changed dramatically. After that, he turned to Toe and asked since she began to train with his sword. The girl shrugs and replies that she does not remember exactly, but at about the same age as a layer. The girl tells how she got lost in the woods near the castle and fell into a trap of Leo Wow. But at that moment, her father saved a little Toe. Since then, her training has begun. Exercises with a sword and mastering magic. Cher was very surprised and asked if it was really about that Leo Wow. The layer claims that she has never met this creature. Leo Vovk is a monster S-rang, she says, and is surprised if the father was really able to overcome it. But the girl nods confidently. Yes, her daddy overcame this beast, and later even made a toy wolf from Leo Wolf. Masamune asks, does the rank S exceeding the power of Nata Klane? The layer, barely hiding the fright, replies, to compare their strength is to say nothing at all. The girl claims that only by combining the forces of the royal knights and brave adventurers will be able to overcome at least one such lion wolf. The young man understands that to meet such a monster is not the best idea. Masamune is wondering whether one of the locals saw the monster S, and whether someone had already happened to someone. Cheris confessed that she was unknown to her details, but she heard that once royal white knights had already spent a similar raid. According to her, Reinhardt is probably aware of this story. The layer notes that Reinhardt is the undisputed leader of the guild. Special, complex tasks are provided for hunters for M monsters. However, because of peace and silence in the vicinity of Rodhousen, such missions are extremely rare. In addition, although these tasks are mostly intended for a tire of the rank of S, repeatedly sent rank of rank A. In addition, each type of monster has its own unique features. Even among the monsters of the same species, those who reach the rank of S or above, everything determines the level of the monster. Masamune notes that the level plays a key role here. He recalls the facial expressions and thinks, what will be at the 500th level, and to what rank can grow? He thinks for a moment, and then says that if such a monster really exists, it simply does not aid any ranking system. Masamune, surprised, clarifies what it means. Shira says that the ranks in the guild reaches the maximum, the level of SSS. There is a so-called endless rank above, but it is not even a real rank, but rather a mark for completely untested and unknown monsters. Masamune explains that in other words, the level of 500 has not been detected, so its boundaries are unknown. It is an endless rank. The girl adds that even if 500 levels can be reached, he will still remain outside any rank system. This is a kind of insurance for the guild. Masamon is wondering whether the layer really believes that there is no such level. The girl agrees, although she confesses that she cannot object at all. Even if one of them happened, she would not be able to report it. Such a meeting would cost her life, and the truth would remain undisclosed. Masamune thinks that he would like to meet that mimic creature again. He wants to find out what the dungeon is. He realizes that it was worth asking the Shoan about everything, because he seems to be aware of many issues. Masamune, this information would be very useful. After this conversation, Masamune, Thena, and Chara trained until the evening. When then she finally got a lot, she decided to join the second part of the lesson. And Masamune, thanks to her studies with the two girls, finally mastered the art of owning a sword. Suddenly, Masamune is in an unfamiliar place, in the middle of the destroyed temple. A surprised guy thinks aloud. He had to fall asleep in the house of the shear. The young man was already convinced that he had fallen into the world, but suddenly heard a voice behind his back, which loudly exclaimed that they had not seen themselves for a long time. Looking back over his shoulder on his Shoan, he wondered what he was doing here. Chon calms Masamune and offers him a little stroll together. They climb into a mysterious and unknown place. Suddenly a stranger appears before the young man. A mysterious man turns to him, they say. Finally he got here. Turning, he states that he called him to this world. Masamune asks who this man is and whether he is a friend of Sean. The unknown only mysteriously smiles and notes that the Masamune probably does not recognize him in this form. He then reincarnates and asks whether he recognizes his massacre now. The guy immediately captures familiar intonations in this voice. The young man recalls how at the very beginning of his journey in the dungeon he was offered to drink a bottle of mysterious fluid. Shilolon asked permission to present his friend, but did not have time to say his name. John agrees with her husband, recognizing that there is nothing more to add, and sincerely apologizes for it. Masamune insists again. Does the unknown, and really not going to introduce himself? In addition, he has no idea where it is now. Masamune at least tries to receive at least some information. The young man only thinks that he acts, relying solely on his own intuition. But he considers that man God retaliation. He is reminded of how Cheyenne responded to the question of God retaliation, and he realizes that the surprise was caused by the fact that Masamune mentioned the name of his friend. The God of Revenge argues that for the massacre this place means nothing, but for Siobhan and God himself revenge it has become a kind of prison. God revenge is that his true body is now resting on the bed, and here, to this place, he called the boy not differently in the likeness of his soul. He advises Masamune to imagine this picture. Masamune is interested in what exactly God revenge. The man explains. The elixir who drank a guy is endowed with an additional property. He creates a special connection between who uses it and God revenge. It was because of this connection that the man was able to call the guy here. Masamune asked to wait a moment and above all, asked what exactly it was the elixir. God revenge replied that this fluid is created on the basis of his own blood and gives to the one who drinks it exceptional, unique ability. Although the given ability is chosen by accident, it will always be boundless. In other words, it will be an unknown skill. However, among the skills obtained, there are those that the young hero is not able to use. God Revenge notes that Masamune is incredibly lucky, because he has gained power capable of defeating even Cheyenne himself. Meanwhile, Cheyenne only nods silently. Masamune admits that the abilities of his time gave him a lot, and he is sincerely grateful for it. However, the guy does not understand why God chose him. The man replies that he did not choose him, anyone could be in this place. He put the elixir there faster for the experiment, and it happened that it was the Masimon who came across him. The young man thinks that if it were not for his luck, he would have already been a victim of that facial expressions. He would have died, and had been eaten for a long time. God Retaliate is wondered if you can already go to the main topic. Masamune suits it, and he, not hiding fatigue, confesses that he dreams of returning to his bed as soon as possible. Shahan approaches him and reports that Masamune will take his skill of possession of the sword. However, Masamune does not understand anything and gets lost in assumptions. The young man asks for permission for a break, because during the day he was already practicing in fencing. He is wondering why he is still training here, in addition to the company of two elderly men, and in such an unusual place. Subsequently, he asked whether he was invited here for the sake of it. The God of Revenge replies that he cannot reveal it. Moreover, he also has no right to explain the reasons for his mystery. What Cheyenne is about to do will convey her own art of possession of the sword of Masamune, and it will end suddenly, in an instant. Masamune notes that God is unable to tell him something, and may be due to the fact that he also cannot open his name to the boy. God Revenge replies that he is also forbidden to name his name. The Mass of Uni is addressed to Shan. Why are you here? Did you not have to die? What happened at all? On this, a man only shrugs his shoulders, they say, and he cannot explain it. Masamune thinks. God Revenge and Cheyenne constantly emphasize that they are forbidden to tell something, and they also call this place their prison. The young man begins to suspect that there is some special connection between the two. Masamune assures that he understood everything and will not ask anymore. Chon apologizes to him. The God of Revenge reassures, they say, once a young man will definitely receive an answer, so there is no point in hurry. After that, Cheyenne states that the moment has come to pass, Masamune his art of possession of the sword. According to his friend, everything will end in an instant. However, he warns, the guy is suffering the same pain as when he swallowed the elixir. Sean asks if the guy is ready to withstand it. He assures that now everything will be good, because since then he has strengthened significantly, and the pain will no longer be as unbearable as when he was swallowing the elixir. Jian firmly grabs the Masamune's head with his giant hand. Masamune felt something wrong and wondered in surprise what the Shun was doing with him. In response, the man only smiled mysteriously and noted what it means. The guy agreed. As soon as Masamune was going to answer, many different movements of the swordmasters suddenly drowned in his mind. Unable to withstand more, he kneeled down and suddenly realized that the pain disappeared. Cheyenne asked the young man how he felt. The guy replied that he had some memories. Cheyenne said that there was a snake technique, the reception of the king of beasts, the Griberg center, imperial style, Rinto, basilisk technique, and besides them, many other unique martial arts. Suddenly, the young man notices that there is one among all the techniques whose names he does not know. Chejon explains, this is his own art of possession of the sword. Combining many styles and relying on his own experience, he produced unsurpassed equipment that simply has no weaknesses. He assures that Masamune will definitely need it in the future, but now the best is to just accept everything and comment. Further, God of Revenge orders Masamune to pass it on Bayam. Find a woman named Caliph there. When you see it, pass only one message. Say you will wait for it on that hill. Masamune had no idea that the events are happening, but the God of Revenge is tirelessly adding to him all new tasks. He explains that if she continues to ask the question, he will understand when Masamune says, "It is in the third drawer." The guy nods as a sign of consent. He claims that he only dreams of ordinary adventures. But since it is thanks to God Revenge, it is necessary to fulfill his assignment when he will be in that city next time. God of Revenge adds that this is just a tip, but the boy is still worth attending school to master magic. The young man is distrustful of whether it is true of true magic. Masamune is a healer, but God Retaliate assures that it will not interfere. On the contrary, acquiring knowledge, he gradually captures many different aspects of his business and will discover new opportunities in his craft. Even if Masamune has only healing and supportive spells, his magical possibilities are not limited. He can always discover new types of magic, because magic has no limits. These words were heard in the mind of Masamune, like a rescue ray of hope. Feeling relief, he agrees to it. Shaolin approaches the young man and says that his sword can be given to that demon. These weapons are too unusual and not for him. Then the man is wondering where the guy learned about Toa. Moreover, he suggests that they have been following him all this time. Suddenly, the Masamune faded and weakened, falling to the ground. His strength was rapidly melting, and before his eyes everything was blurred. God Revenge has noticed that the time has almost passed, and no longer should call him here so often. This may be their last conversation, so he urged them to find them on their own. On that day, a stranger went to the crowd in the old town of the royal capital. A stranger whose figure was lost in the crowd. The man sat at the table and, noticing the visitor, was surprised to ask if Madame Fran was indeed before him. Poor France. He also apologized to overcome such a way to meet him. The woman sincerely thanks for the invitation. After that, he turns to a man sitting at the table named Guido Sador. Guido himself proposes to reject the formalities and simply name it Guido. Afterwards, he represents the girl nearby, his assistant Young. Madame smiles and notes that they have not seen themselves for a long time. She wondered if all was well in the girl. Uni assures that she has no problems. Madame invites her to sit down and states that the girl, as always, is restrained in the answers. However, it is this cold detachment that impresses it. Then Mrs. Fran goes to business and is interested in what reason she was invited. Guido replies that there was one small problem. The spiritual animal, curved by Madame French, was destroyed and finally lost its power. After that, the woman is wondering how many soldiers from the ranks of the Knights of the White King were in battle. But Guido replies that fortunately, none of the knights died in a clash with the monster. He nail, and notes that the main riddle is the emergence of an unfamiliar traveler who stood in the way of the beast. When the Knights of the White King finally arrived, the spirit of the beast was already completely filled with blood. Madame Freny is interested in whether the spirit of the beast was full of fierce. She notes that such a wording sounds quite unusual. Vidovich says that he had to return the body that was taken by the pathologist, so he got a small object and appeals to Madame to use magic again to revive two monsters. Madame makes it clear that he is fully aware of Guido's hints, and invites him to pick up the thing he has just got. Mayo is surprised to watch a powerful flash and immediately asks what it is. Madame tells that, having just received an invitation from Guido, she immediately guessed his true intentions, so she has already prepared a special gift for him. The new moon asks, "What does this flask contain?" Twitch. Madame France is mysteriously answering, A real army of monsters hides inside. The guide broke up in a smile from ear to ear, not hiding his grip. Madame Fran, satisfied with his reaction, confesses that he is glad that his gift came to his liking. She also clarifies, all monsters there are at least in class or even stronger. C Arena is monsters, so she assumes that they can be useful. Madame tells that, leaving the Empire, she grabbed certain resources from the laboratory, and later she managed to return only a small part of them. A friend is interested in when Guido plans to take the next step. The man replies that this will happen in a week, and by that time he wants Madame Fran to increase the production of perfume as much as possible. After Madame Fran left the place of negotiation, Uni noted that her gift is unlikely to be useful. Guido noted that this gift would become a kind of insurance for them, because the traveler who had already dealt with the previous creature could intervene again and negate all their ideas. The next morning, the Musamunier mentioned the guidance of God Revenge. The young man had to find them himself. His reflection interrupted the one that was caught meat. The girl asked what happened to the boy. She noted that the guy had just said something, but Masamune replied that nothing had happened to the sword. The layer noted that the mass coins seemed very pale. The girl was worried about whether everything was fine with him. The guy in response assured that he was feeling as usual. The girl asks if he is really sure, because the guy was only watching fencing training. To adds that the guy did not even hold the sword in his hands. Then Scherer suggested that he may have lost the pleasure of training. However, the guy assured that he still brings him joy and he feels his own progress. He says that today he just wants to wander the city and enjoy his atmosphere. He reassures the girls, asking not to worry about it too much. In fact, thoughts of yesterday's night did not give him rest. Everything happened so rapidly that he could not focus on anything else. But when he watched the training of God the Layer and Toa, it was revealed. Their duel unfolded for him as if a slow-moving movie fragment. No movement was unexpected. Everything looked predictable for the smallest details. So everything that happened last night was not just a dream. If he took the sword in the morning this morning, his behavior would be significantly different from yesterday. The girls would certainly start asking him. Masamune breaks his head, inventing a convincing excuse to avoid tomorrow's workout. But his reasoning suddenly breaks the Toa. She points out the window and, surprised, asks what had happens there. Outside the window, a bold man was walking wide, dragging behind a small one, who had a beastie ears from under his hat, and a tail was throwing behind. The layer apologizes for worrying them, but the girl without delay requires to follow this man immediately. It is likely that this person is engaged in the trade of prohibited goods. The man brings this beast human and stifles it to the ground. He orders as soon as possible to take the girl to the cage. Another standing side by notes that such a beast man will have a high price. The man warns another so that he is careful and does not damage the goods. They close the feast in the cage, ordering her to sit humble and not to make unnecessary noise. The man licks the blade and warns the animal that she is unlikely to dream of mutilated ears. The feast is squeezed. It rolls into a ball and, sobbing, begins to ask your sister for help. Suddenly, a few more people come to her, look carefully, and enthusiastically note what wonderful catch they have today. Someone else adds, a breed of white cats is a rare find. Someone else from the company notes that compared to the girl who was in them yesterday, this new girl is much better. The man notes that their chief is currently absent, so he turns to the second. Maybe we will take the opportunity and have a little fun with her right now. He assures that the bosses will still notice anything, even if they harm her. The other immediately picks up the opinion. Such an opportunity for him is in time, because recently it has been raising tension. One of the men dissolves the door and calls the beetle to himself. He orders her not to move, assuring that everything will end in a moment. The feast begins to resist, but the man reassures her, saying that there is nothing to be scared. The second looks forward to the man, warning that the chief is about to return. Suddenly, one of the men roared, and for a moment, he was thrown through the whole room. He crashed into the boxes that stood in the corner, breaking them away. Masamune released his hands, stating that in his opinion, it would be enough if they simply lose consciousness. The Zairman looked at the young man who had just come. His eyes glowed with curiosity. He turns to her and asks if everything is fine with her. He adds that he accidentally witnessed how she was led somewhere, so he hurried here to help and release her. He reaches out her hand, reassuring, it is not necessary to worry. He will not touch her with his finger. Immediately suggests that I am allowed to help you get out of here. Subsequently, when they went outside with the girl, they were met by To and Layers. The girl waved his hand fun. The Zmirachino wondered what was a massacre. to which the guy with a smile replied that it was his name. In response, he also asked what her name is. The girl was introduced. Her name was in charge. Cherha approached her, greeted, and introduced. After getting acquainted with the Nimu, she asked the girl with a smile whether she knew where her house. The baby thought for a moment, and then she sincerely replied, for her, a real home where her older sister is nearby. The layer assured that she understood everything, and, as he guessed, this house was a church. To asked what she was referring to the church. The girl explained, it is essentially a shelter, where they are temporarily taken care of by children who are left unattended. After reaching one of the shelters, the layer noted that it seemed like their baby. Masimon carefully inspects the building and mentally notes, this place is not similar to the church. It is more like an ancient mansion. Nimu opens the door and sees a maid. In an instant, she breaks into a cry, calls her sister and rushes directly into the arms of a woman. The girl begins to ask where Nimu disappeared, because her sister was terribly worried. Posing, she explains, she was grabbed by some frightening man, but fortunately Masamune came to the rescue and saved her. The sister watching closely those who go to church, sitting for some time at a table with a cup of tea, shared with her sister what happened to her. The woman sincerely thanked them for the salvation of Nimu, confessing that she didn't even imagine how he could thank for such help. The layer assured the sister so that she did not worry. It was true for them to see Nimu intact. The woman says that she sometimes visited her girlfriends. In the capital of the kingdom, it is usually calm, and the locals are kindly treated even with animals. So she was convinced that there were no grounds for worry. She faded and acknowledged that her assumptions were false. Could you imagine that the NAU would be in the hands of smuggling traders, though it seemed to be strictly forbidden? Masamune addresses Shura with a prohibition question. The girl confesses that she really left this moment without explanation, but reminds. In Rodhousen, any operations with the slave trade are strictly forbidden. Moreover, the abduction of people is just as severely punished by law. However, despite the obviousness of this fact, some still secretly do the same in remote places. If the then did not notice the abduction in time, the fate of Nimu would be quite different. Suddenly Masamune notices something on her left hand, and asks if her sister knows what it is. The girl, sheltering, looks straight at the abyss. The sister raises his sweater sleeve, and when he saw it, he is desperately shaking with horror, repeating, "It cannot be!" Shira explains that this image symbolizes the crest of a slave germ, which the merchants were cut on their goods. In other words, the slave comb is an indisputable proof of his subordinate condition. Usually, this symbol has men who are subordinate, but most likely to get it precisely because of what is offense. The comb itself has no magical power, but those to whom it gets stubbornly do not want to run. Perhaps this item is created as invisible bonds for consciousness, which is relentlessly reminded. From now on, you belong to another person. Masamune thinks how many fates have been destroyed by the actions of these merchants. He entrusted all the layers, but was forced to immediately destroy all enemies. Suddenly, Toa reassures the guy, gently asking if everything is fine with him, because his face just looked quite frightened. Sheer is cheerfully turning to Masamune. He says not to worry, and postpone the rest of the conversation for later. The girl assured that she had already contacted the network, so there was nothing to worry about the boy. He agreed with her. She is right. Everything will be resolved as best as possible. A little time has passed, and the massacre together with the girls was already going to go. In the meantime, they went out with their sister and make sure everything is fine. Masamune sat down next to Nimu, gently warning her to be careful in the near future, and no longer go alone. Finally, he said goodbye, but assured that he would certainly visit tomorrow. Toa asked Masamune if he was really going to visit Nimu and tomorrow. After all, he said goodbye. He assured that he would return to her the next day. The young man smiled and noted that she was playing with other children, as if nothing had happened, so he was sure. Tomorrow he would not have a trace of his memory. However, the next morning, she had a joyful massacre and greeted him with the words, "My master." The young man wondered why she came, and the girl replied without hesitation that she only appeared here for meeting her master. The mute again turned to Masamune, gently calling him a mentor, and wondered where they were heading. The young man replied that their path was leading to the guild. Masamune has temporarily settled in the house of Sheer, and it cannot stay here for a long time. You need to find a way to make a living. It is not, without hiding the delight, exclaims that it was necessary to expect from a real master. He is a real adventure seeker. The girl, full of determination, states that she also joins him. Suddenly Masamune calls Toa. The layer were freezing, as if statues, and looked carefully at the young man. To was the first. She suddenly became interesting why she had no way to him as a master. Masamune, without holding back emotions, exclaimed to the girls, demanding that they listen to him, because he never asked him to call him so. To, narrowing her eyes, asked whether it was true. Then the girl returns to the animal and is interested in why she calls the masses her owner. This is answered by the animal, that this is how the mother taught her to speak. The woman states that if someone saves you life, you are obliged to love this person for the rest of your days. Nimu explains that the Lord saved her, and that is why she calls him his master. Toba sighed and replied, if she no longer states, she has nothing left but to believe. Suddenly, a familiar merchant approaches them, and having narrowed his eyes, asks, really, do you know no? The girl exclaims, presenting Masamune a merchant. They say, this young man is Mr. Nimu. The woman is looking at them extremely strange. Masamune begins to realize that the situation is gaining dangerous rotation. Some time has passed, and the merchants of all the events that happened with the music and the layer were over with the To and the layer. The woman looked at her hand carefully, nodded seriously, and said that she was now understanding everything, and that she was not having a truly cruel trial. She gently strokes her head on her head, and confesses that she is grateful to Masamune and this girl for the rescue of a small one. Nimu often runs to her in the store, so she is almost like her daughter for a woman. The woman confesses that if there was such an opportunity, she would not hesitate, and studied those who dared to hurt the little one. However, even now it is difficult for her to believe that this decisive day has come so rapidly. The woman informs Masamune that he has become a voice, so he has no right to give it. If something happens to the girl, she will immediately leave all things and will get a good guy. Masamune thinks whether he is hidden in the fact that he became a mentor of Nimu, some deeper sense. Meanwhile, the girl approaches a woman named Sharon and confesses that she seems very harsh. In response, Karen reassures that such harshness is a habitual feature for parents. A man comes to the store. He reports that he was looking for a layer. The girl recognized Edward in him. She noted that a man still appears on people in this image. The girl wondered if it really had some value for him. Edward, with a smile, notes that no one has no idea that he belongs to the Knights of the White King, because his appearance is not different from others, quite ordinary. Changing the topic of conversation and turning his gaze on Masamune and Toa, Edward addresses the question, who are these people standing next to the layer? The girl represents Masamune, then, and Nemo. Then Edward specifies with interest, aren't these the same participants in the White Knights who are rumored? Removing the hat, he politely bows and apologizes for the delay. A man is presented as Edward Scotch, one of the Knights of the White King. He adds that I am extremely happy to get acquainted with you. Then Shira asks for what reason this man was so persistently searched. The man gets a scroll and reports that it is a message from Reinhard. The layer unfolds the paper and does not believe its eyes. Edward reported that it was the king's personal request. A base leaf appeared in the age and wall. Edward tells the layer that basilisk appeared in a stable owned by Boreas, a friend of the monarch himself. Toa is interested in what a basilisk is. It does not answer that she is also aware of these creatures. According to it, basilisk is a giant snake. The layer asks why she was given this order. Edward replies that he does not know. It was only a written order to pass her. He is sure that His Majesty has his own reason to entrust this case to layers. Suddenly, he intervenes in the conversation and appeals to the layer, asking them to be here. The woman explains that she needs a lacrimal glands and a bag of basilisk poison, as well as large fangs, because she also does not have them. She would be very grateful if they killed the basilisk. They gathered these parts for her. Masamune states that he goes to this task with the layer. If the young man joins them, then they will not stay away and go with him. The girl with anxiety asks if everything will be fine. The guy says it's time to thank her for hospitality and shelter. Toei also claims that everything is fine. The woman proposes to take her with her, but Masamune denies, they say. The girl is still too small for such a trip. In response, she burst into tears, begging not to leave her, because the owner would not be able to go without a NAU. The guy becomes a hunger and explains that they have a battle with a terrible monster, and she is wondering if the girl understands it. It is not genuinely admitted that she wants to become useful to his master. The woman reassures the boy, convincing that he has nothing to worry. Despite his appearance, there is a great healer, and by force she as much outweighs the Masami. But the guy's thoughts are returning to recent events. He recalls how the slave traders have not been captured. Looking into the sad eyes of a little animal, he says she only allows her to do it this time. Some time passed, and the Masamonis group was traveling in a carriage, preparing for new tasks. Meanwhile, the layer exploded with indignation, reproaching that the king was a real parasite and a charm. The royal center has its own basilisk. It could simply contact the guild, especially since the request and so pass through official channels. The girl does not find any significant reason to participate in this person. Masamune advised the girl to calm down and perceive this task as a service for Shuron. At the same time, he is surprised why the layer is so concerned about this case. Suddenly, To translates the conversation to another and is interested in, "What does this girl Confusion know? Does she have magic?" The girl replies that magic is not available to her, but she knows how to make a cat's paw. The Masamune is interested in asking what it is. The girl notes in surprise, they say. Does he not know what it is? The girl gets out of her place and assures that the name himself will explain everything to the master, they say. The paw of the cat is... However, she does not have time to arrange, as suddenly she understands. She does not have the idea what it is. He notes that she knows only one thing. It is a special art of animal, which was passed on to their cat's family from generation to generation. Masamune wants to find out more details. Then, Shura explains, the martial arts of the animal is a unique technique that only representatives of their species have perfectly possessed. She also notes that every animal has a unique style of martial arts. At home, this direction is called cat fist. Masamune is quickly aware that it is a special combat technique. Masamune is interested in not or does not have magic. It does not answer that it is not currently able to spell, but it is a charming cat. If you teach it magical arts, it will be able to use them. The layer was amazed because if the cat-human has magic, it is a special class among cats. The girl explained that such ability is considered congenital and extremely prestigious. She belongs to the highest ranks. Masamune asks, if the beast already has a class from birth, can he get another, not inherited class? The layer explains that some classes develop with age. She tells that she was previously a common knight, and now belongs to the ranks of elite soldiers. The guy is wondering if you can really become a cleric after having mastered the magic of healing. The layer apologizes with sadness and explains that it is impossible because the class of clerics is innate and cannot be obtained by training. She notes that the ways of developing almost all classes have already been well studied, but as far as she knows, the healer class remains undisclosed. Masimon is aware that his fate is to remain a healer forever. There is no curiosity to ask whether her mentor really has the art of healing. The guy nods and explains that he uses exclusively therapeutic and supportive spells. He raises his hand and assures his master, it is not necessary to be sad, because he will stand on his defense. Moreover, the gentleman has rescued, which means that there is no weakness in it. We wondered when they reached Vic. The layer suggested that it would only happen tomorrow. She added that she will have to spend this night in a carriage. Masamune realized that the path was much longer than he imagined. The age was much further than it seemed at first. Masamune wondered whether they did the right thing, leaving the capital. Shira assured that everything is under control. Edward would tell everyone who stayed there. In addition, in the event of unforeseen situations, she also warned Annette. Masamune thinks when she has done it. After all, he saw the girl talking to the ring yesterday. He is wondering if the share ring really allows her to communicate at a distance. The girl demonstrates the decoration and confirms, yes, this is true. Every royal white knight has a similar ring. The young man notes that he has a similar ring. He tells that he once took her from someone but never used it. However, it recognizes that this thing is extremely useful for communication, because it makes it easy to keep in touch, even being far apart. The layer explains that its ring acts only within the kingdom, while the Masamune decoration is able to function beyond. The young man confirms her words, adding that this was what he told him, who gave this ring. The girl carefully examines the ring and notes that she is extremely valuable and apparently made of purest materials. Toi is wondering who gave Masamune this wedding ring. The young man replies that he was almost not familiar with this man. He says that a stranger suddenly attacked him, and he was forced to defend himself. But in the midst of the battle, the man suddenly offered to become allies. The young man says that as soon as the stranger saw him, the aggressive Arnshal broke up around him. He was preparing for the worst mentally, but it was at this moment that his magic stopped Masamune's and did not allow him to escape. In addition, he introduced himself to a member of an organization, suggested joining them, advised to think of his proposal, and handed me a ring. The layer noted that it all looks more than suspicious, and then wondered if the stranger called her the name of the organization. Masamune hesitated a little, and then finally replied that the organization was called A Dragon's Heart. The layer shuddered and was quite embarrassed by the herd. The layer asked if the stranger really said. Masamune asked if she heard something about this organization. The girl was in surprise that, in her opinion, everyone knows about them. The Dragon's Heart is famous for hunting politicians. They are mercilessly dealt with the authorities who have tarnished themselves with bribery, murder, and other crimes. Most states have declared significant monetary rewards on their heads. Masamune remembered how the stranger threw the phrase about the destruction of the rotten top or something in that spirit. Sheer suggested that she was probably talking about them. She told about an event that glorified the dragon's heart to the whole world, a loud incident that happened in the kingdom of the Tuari. The Queen of Preva, the owner of Torrent, performed a terrible mass extermination, seeking to create the perfect kingdom. She killed more than half the population of the kingdom, with the most frequent victims of the elderly. Masamune is wondering whether it was through this that the dragon's heart was hunting for her. Shire replies that yes, but they not only killed the Queen of Preva. Everyone who had the slightest connection with her was killed. Children were among the victims. Masamune asks whether Toei is aware of such horrible events. The girl replied that she was aware of it, though not as good as a layer. Accidentally, she listened to her parents' conversation about their acquaintance. It seems that his name is Carpent, or somehow looks like. It was he who founded the organization of the Dragon's Heart. After that, the layer turns to Masamune and thinks what the proposal of this stranger could be. The young man confesses that he knows nothing yet. He has no idea when their paths intersect again, but it is not so important now. Until they meet, there is no point in speaking for reflection. Even the location of this organization remains a mystery to them. However, the invitation from them is a great surprise. Masamunari reports that 3 went to Griberg. He is wondering what they are doing there right now. Meanwhile, on the border of the kingdom, Griberg guards 3 strangers. The guards immediately order them to stop and remove the hoods. These 3 were those who met Masamune at the very beginning of his adventure. They were part of the Dragonheart organization. Griberg is a spacious royal state. On the approaches, a checkpoint is installed, and another security post is located directly in front of the head gate leading to the castle. In addition to the city itself, there are several surrounding villages under the protection of the fortress. On the approaches to them there are additional posts of inspection, so to get into the territory of the kingdom unnoticed was considered absolutely impossible. One of the strangers who just disarmed the guards, removed the hood, and turning to a friend says he was right. These gates are almost not guarded. The other states that only rarely someone dares to go through this way. Most often this either traders or travelers. The girl notes that only 2 guards here are clearly not enough. The man in response suggests that the rest is probably busy with the battle with demons. However, last time the guards were much larger. At this point, the back of the 3 strangers was knocked on horse hooves. In the end, they were cunning to the trap and skillfully surrounded on all sides. Suddenly, the rider on the horse was jumping into the unexpected guests. He loudly stated that the knights surrounding the Trinity have no chance and should retreat immediately. The rider was a gray man with a long beard. He stated that he would deal with uninvited guests. One of the uninvited guests turns to an elderly man, calling him a grandfather. The old man sighs and notes that they have not seen a lot of time with Alfred. But despite all, he is genuinely happy to see him alive and unharmed. However, he notices that the new moon decided to contact those scoundrels standing nearby. His Highness will be upset when he learns about it. The young man asks the man to stop resorting, noting that he, as usual, only pretends to be. A man with threatening notes in his voice notes that Alfred seems to have decided not to go home anymore. He is interested in what could bring him to this city, because this country is not about to deal with such as he. Ahead is a young man with dark hair and asks to present it. His name is a Brow. In short, they learned. In Griberg they were looking for heroes and announced it to the entire land. It is a forbidden witchcraft that requires extremely large casualties. As far as the young man knows, there is no other way to call him other than the sacrifice. The man claims that Zik came here to answer this question. However, he refuses to talk about it and is demanding to answer only his question. He claims that this magic will inevitably cause new wars. But even before the conflict will break, those who are confused in it will meet the inevitable and rapid death. The man notes that the guy is too frank in his words. He also adds that there is no reason to hurry. ZK points out that this is only a matter of time when events extend the entire planet. The consequences of witchcraft that calls heroes is not easy to hide. The man notes that Zik should be convinced with his own eyes. However, he did not promise that they would allow them to pass. Zika is sure that this means that a man will resist. He warns, if he risks, he will no longer leave this place alive. The Zika calls his name, Albert Morlow. The man calls Zika a cheeky boy and states that he was aware of him since the beginning. Meanwhile, the young man asks his comrades to move away because he is about to deal with this issue in person. Zika's partner warns him to be as careful as possible, because despite the appearance of this man, he remains a real sage. Zeke, in response, assures the new moon that there is no reason to excite. He will not give way to his positions in front of the famous forest magician. The man is sorry. If three acted together, they would have a chance to win. But the Zik replies confidently, he himself will cope. He states that Zyke seriously underestimates him, and the organization calls the Dragon's Heart a gathering of meaningless fools. Having voiced his name, he swears to put an end to the life of Zika. Meanwhile, Zik evokes the power of his dragon and strikes Albert Marlow. Subsequently, huge trees filled the whole battlefield. Albert Marlow, filled with blood, lay motionless between their roots. He said bitterly that he could not imagine his defeat. He addressed Zika for whether he was a real man. The man believed that a dragon was in front of him, because he had already met these mythical creatures as a child. Zik coldly refuses that it does not see any sense to answer such a question. The man just smiles bitterly and notes, even a few words for the dying old boy is sorry. Zik sends nearby and encourages him to repeat the question. He turns to the man, wondering whether the Griberg rite was in the rite of heroes. The man closes his eyes and points out that the guy understands everything. He adds that there is no smoke without a flame, but there are no traces of the ritual. All the evidence is erased, so the bundle will find nothing. The man confesses that they spent the call rite a month ago. Since then, a lot of time has passed, and all the traces of magic have long been gone without a trace. Zik is raised and states that it no longer matters, because Albert has just admitted that he had spent the ritual of calling the heroes, and that is enough. Lemian notes that the actions that are about to commit Zinging's comrades can in no way be called justice. This is more reminiscent of a senseless, cruel massacre. Words of justice hurt the Zik. He denies that it is not about justice and not about lying down. It is not at all whether they believe in it. Then Albert appeals to Alfred, trying to find out if he really wanted that. He is wondering if Alfred feels something, looking at the person in this state, and astonishment he asks where the good Alfred went. In response, the young man states that it is in vain to turn to his feelings. From the very beginning, all people weighed anything for him, and therefore he does not feel anything besides disgust. He adds that Albert and Griberg not only solved the war with the demons, but also used their subordinates as the exchange coin in trials with magic and pawns. In his opinion, all of them are only foolish stupid. He notes with disgust that this country has come to an end. Albert in response assures that they are not stupid, and adds that everyone has to do the same, otherwise there is simply no point in everything. Alfred turns away, but thinking, he adds that it may even be happiness to go with such thoughts. Later, he puts a point in conversation and orders the man to complete his life without delay. Albert smiles and notes that the mean to pronounce such words to the doomed old. Resting on the root of the trees, he speaks his last words. Now he sees that Alfred is no longer the prince he had ever been. At that moment, she ran to her owner and exclaimed enthusiastically that everything around was just incredible. It referred to the big market that they went. Masimon, along with their company, arrived in Wick. He was struck by an unprecedented number of people around. The layer explained that this city is known as a shopping center, so a large crowd of people here is a common matter. Masamune is fascinated by the excellent products and confesses that she is very fond of buying these beautiful things. The young man smiles and says that once they have reached Vic, they can afford to buy a few liked products. Shura proposes to go to the farm first, and when they complete their work here, show them everything during the excursion. When the farm finally got, her gaze immediately touched a strange animal. She said distrustfully that she did not want to hear about this creature, Schurstabik, because she does not seem sweet at all. Masimon urged the girl to rush and keep up. Finally, they got to the house. The layer knocked on the door, but did not hear the answers. Then she thought that there was probably no one inside. But suddenly he did not pay attention to the big crowd that gathered nearby. A crowd gathered near the giant table. People discussed something with each other. Someone pleaded with someone, and the other confessed that he was living in fear every day. People looked at this man with condemnation and surprise. Some argued that, judging by the conversations, he would have long had to get rid of the extra person. Others denied. How can he just retreat and leave his place? And some more advised him to sell the farm and finally heal calmly, without unnecessary care. They questioned the owner of the farm named Bira. The man was noticeably confused. The man struck the villagers to show a little more, explaining that he had already sent a request for help to the guild in the capital. The woman exclaimed that Bori has been talking about it for a long time, so we can assume that they were not going to come here. The man confidently replied, he was convinced that help will certainly appear today. The man begged to wait a little more, at least tomorrow, but the residents did not want to listen to it. Masimon finally realized how cruel these people are. Suddenly, the layer exclaimed loudly, calling everyone to stop and pay attention to it. She announced that she had arrived from the capital and was sent here with an important mission to destroy Basilisk. The girl was boldly introduced. Her name is Layer. Bori was genuinely surprised to learn that the girl belongs to adventurers. The man did not hide the joy and urged everyone to look at everyone. Finally, real heroes from the guild came to them, so now all their troubles will remain behind. People gradually diverged, angrily complaining. If this man reported that adventurers should come today, no one would have raised such a noise. Bori's age pressed the hand of the layer when their scene was noticed by a man. With annoyance, he spat. He turned away sharply, which immediately attracted the attention of Masamune. She felt that some smell was blowing in the air. Masamune became wondering what she means, but the girl only mysteriously noticed that there was a strange aroma around. After that, they both moved after their husband. A man with a trembling in his hands firmly shook his palm, overflowing with the joy that they finally got. The girl, with a light smile, noted that they were detained a little on the road. The man asked if they were really going to kill the basilisk. The Masamune interrupted them, saying that today they will end with this monster, because he will not be eager to resist the city. The man, turning to the frightened boys, asked them to wait a little. He sincerely thanked them for bravery, but said, Basilisk belongs to the monsters of Class A. Once upon a time he was an adventure seeker, and therefore he advised them to hurry, not to hurry and rush with a decision. Shera reassures everyone, confidently stating that you cannot worry. As long as Mr. Masimon, everything will certainly go away. The young man was convinced that today he would deal with this business, and Shera for some reason relied too much on him. The task, however, was entrusted with her. In addition, she also accidentally spoke, calling his name. Shera proposes to look at the stable, and wondered if it really belongs to Boyas. The man nods in response. The layer calls Masamune and passes the keys to the shed. The three of them went to the building, and the young man said that everything saw was not only the fruit of her imagination. The girl notes that in the stable it smells just as before. Masamune jokingly emphasizes, it is unlikely that it means the smell of basilisk. Nimu notes that the man in an expensive dress, which recently appeared here, had an identical smell. The Borch is beside her and is interested. Is it really about that man with a wart under his nose? The girl nods in response. Masamune is interested in a man if he has some information about this person. Boreas replies that his name is Mr. August, and most likely it is about him. The Masamune is wondered if Boreas is familiar with him. He replies that when he sent a request to the capital, it was August who arrived with an order. They should remove the basilisk. Augustus is a merchant who once settled in this city. The layer is wondered if he really sought to get rid of basilisk. Beret replies that the real purpose of the merchant was a reward in the form of this land. Brichetti noted that this proposal seemed extremely strange to him, so he refused August, because this land was inherited from generation to generation. Masamune argues that he was clear to him, and suggests that August is involved in this case. The layer also agrees that it is likely to be. Usually the basilisks settle in the deep thickets of the forest, so it is a great suspicion that this monster has chosen a nest here. The girl suggests that Augustus, apparently, just intended to assign this land. Beret is stunned. It is difficult for him to believe in such, and he tries to understand what pushed it to go so far. Masamune notes that they were good that they took with them mute, otherwise they would not feel this strange smell. Toa approves the girl, sincerely praising her for his excellent work. Masamune notes, if it is about it, instead of killing the basilisk, it is better to just drive him away. Cheris proposes to simply faints him, and then pull it into the woods and wait for him to be conscious. The young man is inflamed with this idea, considering it wonderful. The Masamune unlocks the lock and opens the door, but inside his gaze comes across 3 giant heads without bodies. He closes the door and reports that there are 3 basilisks inside. The layer is shocking because, according to the request, there should be only 1. The man explains that yesterday there was really only 1 basilisk, but the layer does not believe that they could have become 3 in just one night. The girl notes that even the smallest drop of basilisk's poison is deadly, so hardly anyone would dare to go to the task, having deal with 3 basilisks at once, if it were not for the temptation of extraordinary reward. She adds that the mission rank will remain unchanged, but the award for it is really significant. Musmonia understands why the Sharo did not want to fulfill this request. It seems that to leave these basilisks would be too risky. Bore puts his hands and with repentance asks for the travelers an apology. He confesses that there were 3 of them from the beginning. Lord August wanted to get acquainted with the task that Bore recorded, so he had to lie. If people learned about 3 basilisks inside, they would take the most decisive activities. The man understood perfectly. No adventure seeker would dare to oppose such a trinity. However, he could not simply leave everything for the way. Monsamon asked in the layers, if you take off these monsters of the head, they will die? The girl confidently confirmed, yes, it will kill them. The young man reports that the plans have changed. Now they intend to destroy all the basilisks. However, he does not forget that Sharon still needs materials that can be obtained from them. Masamune states that he can handle himself and asks anyone not to approach the shed. Nemo in a panic shouts that it is too dangerous because the guy is only a healer. But Masamune soothes the girl, promising that she will deal with enemies lightning. He thinks, since he needs materials, decomposition cannot be used. There will be nothing left of the monsters. So, you will have to equip yourself with a sword. The young man goes to the stable and immediately encounters 3 giant basilisks. In memory, there is a technique that will allow him to overcome all 3 enemies at the same time. He finds the technique he needs. It is a divine speed, made in the style of the King of Animals. The sword of the abyss of the King of Animals. With one lightning movement, he disagrees 3 monsters, and in a moment he quietly went outside, as if nothing had happened. Instantly silent, the layer, and Boreas, the age of frozen, stunned in his complete silence. She was delighted with him, and enthusiastically called the masters incredible, because he did everything surprisingly quickly. Masamune noted that they need to replenish the materials with the layer, because the girl will need tonsils, poisonous glands, and large fangs. In response, the Shara has hardly promised to get into the case immediately. Toa returns to Masamune, and notes that these basilisks did not pose a danger. The guy asks in surprise what she means, and the girl explains, these creatures were taught. They were tamed. Suddenly, the merchant Augustus runs to them, and, exciting his hands, asks that they had done. He states that the basilisks belong to the city. In response, the ages wondered if the merchant really stood for all these events. Suddenly, a man emerged behind August. He wondered which of the participants was the boar. Adding a sinister intonation, a stranger promised that someone's head would twist in a wonderful pirate as soon as his sword meets her. The man noticed the bodies of 3 basilisks and was surprised to ask why his pets are now lying on the ground. August points to the Masamuno group and accuses them of destroying him the basilisco. The man inspects the crowd and, pointing to the Toei, asks whether she really dealt with his basilisks. Then he looks at the layer, noting that her magic is not inferior in force. Further, with a cold smile, he proposes to destroy all men first. And for women, brutally states that they will cut their limbs first and then pull to the tavern, forcing them to work out the death of their pets. August laughs, stating that Boreas himself was guilty of everything. It was necessary to agree on his proposal. Boreas is questioned why the merchant needed his land. August straightens his hands and announces that he wants to build a luxurious estate. Considering the picturesque city from his new home, he will enjoy life, because this luxury is dreaming of every merchant. Bore's age mocks August, calling him a pathetic man. But the merchant only shrugs his shoulders. They say that no one is interested in the idea of Lycook. He adds that he could be fully paid for the land if Bore agreed to give it voluntarily. In this case, it would be unlikely that anyone had to die. All this violence could be avoided if the man had not hired these adventurers. The man laughs mockingly and turns to Bujus. Everything is over, because he was destined to die. Armed with a sword, he turns to August. They say they are both great strengths, so he will have to pay generously for such a dangerous work. August assures that he didn't even think about fraud. He promises to double the fee if he's able to destroy everyone. But if someone stays alive, the man will not receive a single penny at all. The mercenary asks who August considers himself, because everyone knows him as Gordon. Then that man comes closer and asks who will become the first, offering the audience to decide on this choice. Toa boldly acts forward and states that the first will accept the call. Gordon smiles and asks whether this girl really wants to compete with him, on Sam, and if not, let the second participant join. Shira boldly goes forward and states that he joins the company. Masamune, looking at both of them in surprise, asks that they thought this time. Together, they turn to Mr. Masamune, asking to stay away and not interfere with the duel. Let them be left behind. A surprised young man looks confusedly, and Gordon is angry that he is not liked. Gordon states with disgust that he does not like it because he despises such as Masamune, those who hide behind the backs of women. He casts a fierce look at him, full of desire to destroy him first. Meanwhile, Toe with the layer already rushed to an attack on a stranger, but he effortlessly kicked their jerk with their heavy wide sword. The man noted that the girls were extremely agile. They seemed to have sought to play with him. Instantly pushing them with his jerk, he makes Masamune realize before him a truly powerful opponent. The man rushes to Toa, brazenly announcing that he will be with them and will certainly satisfy them. At that moment, the layer rushed at him rapidly, but Gordon had already swung, going to meet her with a knee blow. The layer immediately became awakened and hurried to cover with her hand. Gordon is surprised to notice how she was able to repel this attack. This result is quite characteristic of the owner of White Knights, he notes. The girl states that the man confused her with another, but he assures that the layer is not able to deceive. He has not yet realized that it is the two options that are right, but if he continues to play a little more, he will be clear soon. He recounts the history of the Bori farm, remembering that these lands once belonged to King Arnold, Vladiar Rodhousen. He is still a king, so he would hardly decide to send an ordinary adventure seeker here, especially if his friend Boreas was in trouble. The layer instantly accepts the battle stable, and states that all this is only a senseless assumption. She rushes to him, but the man cleverly evades. Gordon is dissatisfied with her tongue and notices the girl that he is lying in her. He suddenly attacks her, but the layer has time to bend and immediately conducts a series of rapid cases. However, Gordon skillfully reflects all her attacks with her sword. He then states that he knew for a long time. The layer is the ruler of White Knights. The layer exclaims the name Toe loudly, and the girl instantly attacks Gordon with a lightning spell. Shira recedes back and praises the girl with a smile. She coped well. August looks closely at this man. Squeezing the burned sword in his palm, he suddenly releases the animal roar and awakens his berserkier force. Cher immediately feels dark magic that penetrates this spell. Masamune realizes that the girl is frightened, and it seems Gordon used some forbidden magic. Gordon notes that the White King, obviously, is well aware of how dangerous this magic is. He was so cruel for the first time, but now all this is behind. Turning, he solemnly announces that he is not equal now, he is invincible. Masamune recedes to the side and points out that this form seems extremely dangerous. Gordon breaks into a cry, demanding that Masamune be silent and not interfere, because at first he wants to be fun with the girls himself. The layer rushes rapidly, and then shouts to stop immediately, but the layer ignores her call and strongly attacks the monster. Her rapier with a crack breaks on the strong armor of Gordon. The man apologizes, but the next moment sharply beats the girl. From the impact she takes off into the air, crashes into a tree, and bouncing, falls again next to him. He goes closer and notes that she does not even know what magic is dealing with. Her physical and magical blows no longer impress him. He waves his hand to hit the girl, but at this moment, because of her back, Toe appears lightly. Toa's eyes flash a lightning glow. The man rotates sharply, but the girl instantly despairs him. She lifts a sword that sparkles with thundering sparks and breaks Gordon in his unreasonable, Berkovska likeness. The man categorically denies, they say, it is simply impossible, and Sterile is stunning watching everything that is happening. The man falls on the ground and part of his body is already cut. Tella releases his hand, wonders whether everything is fine with her. The layer confesses that Toya saved her, and then sincerely thanks that she always supports them in difficult moments. Suddenly Gordon appears behind the girl. No one will understand how he still manages to stay on his feet. Gordon emphasizes again. Now he is not equal, he is invincible. He possesses the true magic of the resurrection. The man wields a damn big spear. Toa rushed to protect the lair, but immediately in front of the girls was Masimon and imposed his spell. Auguste looked around confusedly, trying to understand what happened. Suddenly Gordon's hand falls down to his feet. Masamune is wondering if he really likes the same. Masimon turns to Boreas asking what to do with Augustus. The man immediately rushed to Bori, begging to let him go. It sits that no worries will be caused anymore. Warus replied that this land was inherited from generation to generation, and he was not going to give it to the one who is guided only by his own selfish desires. If August swore never to appear in this world again, he will be given a life. August gives his promise and begs for a mercy. For a while, Bori reports that he has already collected all the necessary materials. The lair thanks to him for his help. Bore rejects that he does not need gratitude because he did nothing special. The man also points out that, unfortunately, he will not be able to offer more than indicated in the order. But for compensation he is ready to thank differently. He stretches them a bag and is wondering if they will accept it instead of the promised. Bohi says that in the bag, meat of stones grown, and some of the selected materials brought from Uastines. He asks to accept it all from him. Bori apologizes and apologizes, but he is not more capable of. Masamune looks at happy girls and assures a man that this is really a wonderful reward, so you should not worry. Bori Age is grateful that today they all stood in defense of this ranch, and for that he will remain grateful to them for life. He thanked them again sincerely. While they go on the road, the layer is interested in Masamune, whether he really mastered the art of the sword. After all, during her fencing lessons, the guy could not completely. But when Basilisk appeared, he effortlessly dealt with the monster. Masamune is aware that he has received this ability after that day, but confesses. It is not easy to describe it with words. Shira says he trusts the boy. She also points out that he clearly attracts trouble. Masamune apologizes for it. After that, they decide to go shopping in the city and go shopping. A certain moment has passed, and Masamune's detachment was already among a crowded local bazaar. Masaguma noticed how the product carries with meat. He noted that she was looking at him with such appetite, as if she had long dreamed of a real feast. Toa assured that nothing like this is happening, and on the contrary, it is not strange. The Masamune asked her not to turn to him because everything is fine. Toa showed the way where he was. Masamune approached the girl and asked that she liked. Wow, a delight answered that necklaces look incredibly beautiful. The merchant asked if these necklaces appealed to her. The girl confesses that she likes these jewelry. The man in response points out that she has a wonderful taste, because these necklaces are decorated with a rare crystal from Polster. Masamune takes the necklace in his hands and examines it carefully. The man reports that the Polstera country has already disappeared from the map of the world, but assures that the purchase of these netluces will be a real find for them, and will definitely not cause pity. Cheris notes that Polster crystals enjoy wide glory. Initially, they have a rich blue tint, but over time they change their color depending on the magical power of the owner. The merchant explains that the shade of the stone depends directly on the strength of the magic in its owner. Each time, he looks forward to what color he will become a gem this time. Among the merchants are rumors. They say this stone helps to find a powerful sorcerer. Masamune thinks that you do not buy this necklace in memory of the trip. He is wondering how much these necklaces cost. The merchant replies, 3,000. So Masamune orders 3 pieces at once. In a moment, he carefully puts the necklace on his neck. The girl thanked the young man sincerely. The Masamune asks her not to lose the necklace. She replies that he will keep this thing as the most expensive treasure. Then it approaches them, and with a gentle smile asks the Masacle to help her necklace. The guy was shot and blushed, but still put a necklace on the neck. The girl lifts her face and thanks the boy sincerely. Unexpectedly, Masamune blushes, pouring a blush. The layer also scattered and unconsciously closed her eyes. The confused Masacle hastily offers to help the layer wear a necklace. The girl, a little worried, assures that she can handle herself. Some time has passed, and Masamune notices the sign of the wine shop. The layer notes that the place is reminiscent of the wine shop. They choose to go inside. The silent muds up, feeling the sharp smell of the alcohol that is swollen inside. The merchant welcomes the guests and wonders if they are looking for something specific. Masamune calmly replies that no, they do not need anything special. The man with a gesture points to exquisite drinks and assures that they should try. Masamune immediately becomes clear that such a choice will devastate his wallet. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to the announcement. A man reports that a drink called Old Hell is no longer served. Masamune is wondering if it is wine. The man questioned, "What?" The new moon seems to have not even heard of such a drink. Old Hell produced bottles, called ghost wine. This drink has not been manufactured for a long time. Even the seller has no idea how many such rare bottles are still in the world. Masamune suddenly recalls that he had already met this name somewhere and the inscription on the label. Suddenly, he remembers the drink he came across the dungeon at the very beginning of his journey. He gets the bottle and asks if it is the same Old Guilt. The man grabs Masamune's by his hand and asks for herself whether he is able to see. The frightened boy nods back. The man carefully examines the bottle with the help of special devices. Slightly discontinuing, he asks whether it is the wine that he once tasted Masamune, and even allowed her to try it. The young man nods in response. Having examined the bottle, the man confidently states that she is not fake at all. The young man invites him to taste wines. Suddenly surprised, the man asks, "Is it really possible?" It pours a little drink into the glass, easily rotates it, allowing the drink to be filled with oxygen, inhales the aroma, and takes a small sip to feel its taste. Suddenly, he's shown, and he exclaimed that this drink could really be called Old Guilt. The man tells that in his childhood, he had to taste Old Hell in his father's office, and that taste struck him to the depths of his soul. Although it happened many years ago, it still stores those unforgettable sensations in memory. He looks carefully at the bottle and claims that it is undoubtedly the original, a real rarity. The man asked Masamune where he took it. The guy in response reported that he found a thing in the dungeon. The man thought for a moment, squeezed his fist, and gathering with the spirit, wondered if the Masamune could give him a drink. The man assures that he does not think to ask for this gift. He is ready to pay any price that will only be called. After the pause, she suggests, "What do you say to the account of 10 million? Suddenly, Cher is rapidly talking into the conversation and asks whether she did not really hear about 10 million. The man gets the most expensive thing from the store, and states that Masamune can also get this value. Moreover, he offers the young man to pick up everything in this store. Masamune, with a little starry, asks him to wait. Masamune notes that this is a big price for one bottle, to which the man denies sharply. On the contrary, this is not enough. He has long been in this business and does not intend to hide the truth. It is rumored that such a fault has not been found for a long time. But every real alcohol connoisseur would have dreamed at least once to taste him. It is estimated at 100 million, and the aristocrats are good to give it a whole billion. For the first time, the young man realized that he had no idea about the existence of such frantic value. The man explains that it is for this reason that the young man has the right to ask him anything, and can now offer no more than 30 million. The man suddenly remembers his influential connections. He can easily offer wine directly to the aristocrats, so earnings will not be less than 1 billion. He promised the boy that he would give him half the money he received. That is why the commander is convinced that this man really needs this wine. In addition, he has about 100 bottles in stock, and many tubs. By the expression of the seller's face, it is evident that he sincerely tells the truth, so nothing wrong will happen. The young man calmly announces the amount, 30 million. If this man is able to pay the entire amount right away, then the bottle will be it now. As for half of the passionate after-sale, he is unlikely to refuse to share it. The man could not believe heard. He had no idea that the guy would agree to sell this bottle. He asks to wait a moment, and then goes with a bag. The man puts the first 5 million inside and explains that he has just received this money from the bank. Masamune is surprised that there are banks in this world. Meanwhile, the man promises to bring more money. He teaches 30 million in front of him, and receiving a dreamy bottle of precious drink, suddenly blossoms in tears of happiness. The layer is surprised as soon as she sees the money. It is unexpectedly found out that the old guilds were in the Masamune. The guy asks the girl with surprise whether she is really knowing this drink, to which she proudly replies that her father is the owner of the vineyards. The merchant is interested in layers whether it is a descendant of the Ecotl. The girl proudly replies that the daughter of Brown Ekerate. She heard, the old Gelt is considered the best wine in the world. The man assures that this is pure truth. After that, he promises Masamune he will definitely return with revenue. He puts the bottle in the box and is wondering that the guy is going to do next. Masamune suddenly recalls that the rapier layers broke. The girl confesses that she is very ashamed because of it. This rapier is handed to every knight of the White King. Therefore, she was forged specifically for her. Now only to imagine how much she would have to lay out for a new. The guy invites the girl to buy a new weapon for her. but the layer with sadness confesses that he will not be able to thank him for such generosity. He reassures her, assuring that this is not a cause for excitement. Then the guy decides to entertain, and to buy them upgraded clothes. Toa is interested in the clothes that the guy smiles and notes that the girl cannot appear daily in the same. The assistant seller picks up the conversation, adds that he knows the wonderful store, and invites all the guys to accompany him there. Masamune thanks to her husband. Shira recalls the sword of Lord Masamune and notes that these weapons seem extremely strange to her. The young man removes the sword and explains that it is a blade of Smias, which he also found in the dungeon. The man asks him to show him a weapon and then warns the Masamune not to rush the word dungeon without unnecessary. The young man is worried about why such a ban. The man in response points out that if this sword was really obtained in the dungeon, the matter becomes serious. This sword may be legendary or even mythical, and therefore the guy can be threatened with a serious danger. Masamune is interested in whether weapons are really divided into ranks. On this layer notes that all materials, weapons, drills, and even monsters have their own ranks. Ordinary rank is considered the lowest, and the highest is fantastic. In addition, she notes that there are no generally accepted prices for objects with rank below ordinary, such as goblins' teeth. The man asks to listen carefully, after which he notes that this sword must be assessed. He already guesses about the degree of this blade, but to make sure, he advises to look at him with his own eyes. Weapons can be estimated directly at the store, it will now show. He also adds that Masamune will be able to decide whether he would safely leave his sword. The young man suggests that this sword once belonged to Shanyan himself, so his level should definitely be high. So he decides to take advantage of the moment and find out the true meaning of this relic. After that, he appeals to the man to hold them further. In the end, they got to Cook's shop. The man explained that it is a universal store that belongs to Kukanon Company. However, in fact, they mostly traded artifacts. The Masamune group entered the store and immediately plunged into an incredible variety of goods. The young man noted with surprise, the assortment here was so wide as if before him the wealth of a large corporation opened. The kid happily watched everything around it, and then the head rushed to run the store. To called her to stop and hurried after her. The man put the sword on the counter and asked to evaluate it. He told Masamune that he would wait here until the examination continues, and the boy allowed to look at the outskirts. Masamune suggested looking for Toa with Mute, and Shiri, meanwhile, advised to look at the new rapier for himself. The girl doubted whether she could do so. Masimon explained that the purchase of a new rapier would be a kind of payment for the room. He will get something in return, and the girl will not have to feel uncomfortable. Shir thought for a moment, and then said that if the cases are that way, she agreed to accept these conditions. After some time, considering armor, Masamune Satoa listened carefully to the girl. She noted that she did not see anything interesting for herself. She already had a sword, but the armor was too massive. She was hard to have something easier and more comfortable. Suddenly, the consultant interferes with their conversation and suggests that this equipment may be perfect for the girl. These lightweight armor are made of scales and leather wirons. The armor is rare, so it is extremely strength and durability. Masamune believes that a rare rank is not worth much attention. He would like to get something much more valuable. In addition, this armor does not fit the warrior Toa. The young man draws attention to the curtain and is interested in what is hiding behind her. The consultant reports that there is a royal class department here. However, before letting there, you need to make sure that visitors are solvented. The girl is wondering if they have enough money. The young man demonstrates money and asks whether 10 million will be enough. The girl immediately apologizes and invites you to follow this room. From her behavior, the young man guesses that the title of royal person is not so unattainable. As soon as the threshold was crossed, the Masamune felt, the atmosphere here is completely different, unbounded. At the same moment, Toa is interested in the guy if he really is going to spend all 10 million. She assures that there is no point in spending so much money even when it comes to royal title. The guy insists, armor here should be first class. He is not sure how much it should cost, so not to spend the extra, it proposes to look at everything first. The young man approaches the showcase and, referring to Toa, is interested in, what about these things? The consultant notes that you are Gagoromo of the Keeper. It is a unique work of the senior alchemist, skillfully created from the fabrics and materials of the royal grade. In addition to extreme strength and elasticity, it is also surprisingly easy. Ta asked the boy about his opinion. He replied that the thing looks appropriate. It would be much better for the girl than massive armor. so they decided to pick up this thing. Masamune is interested in cost and hears in response, 1.5 million. That asks the guy if he is really sure of his decision. However, Masamune assures that there are no difficulties, and they will definitely buy it. The excursion group is set to try on armor, and Masamune suddenly attracts the attention of the information that is delighted. The girl confesses that there is so much interesting around that she is difficult to make a choice. Masamune asks the consultant whether a place for the baby is reserved. He demonstrates a mithril shirt and notes that it can be worn under other armor. This item was created by the Elf's Master, so its cost is a lot of 2 million. Thanks to magical reinforcement, it is able to change the size, adjusting it to its owner. The young man is wondering what title this thing has. He has answered that the t-shirt belongs to the royal rank. Masamune explains that this shirt can be worn under clothes. It will be a reliable protection. The girl is surprised. Such armor costs a lot of money. However, Masamune only shrugs and replies that the safety of Nem for him is much more valuable than any expenses. The girl exclaimed that she understood everything and thanked the boy happily. Masamune advised her to dress and try on a t-shirt. Then she approached the Masamune, holding something new in her hands. The guy was already taking his breath, so beautiful. The girl wondered what he thinks about it. After getting rid of, the guy noted that this outfit is very high. He wondered where she had new clothes, to which the girl explained that the consultant helped to pick up this outfit and assured that she suits her perfectly. Meanwhile, Masamune came out to be Nima, saying that she had already dressed. It had another sweater that was clearly different from the previous one. Masamune wondered where she had these clothes. Nima replied that the consultant specifically picked him up for her. She noticed that she has a special pocket for the ears on the hood. At this point, a man appeared and explained that this detail was created for the girl's appearance. Thanks to her, she hears perfectly even in the hood. Masama appreciated such a non-standard approach to maintenance. Meanwhile, the layer was admired by the exquisite sword, decorated with a snowflake near the arm. Suddenly, Masamune approached her and asked if she liked the weapon. The girl stated that she did not sympathize with her, and the guy thought at the same moment. Reading her thoughts is extremely easy. The consultant reported that this rapier, derived from the unicorn horn, comes from the mountains of Arda. The interested young man immediately asked what the mountains were. The girl said that the Art of Mountains is a mountain range in Modern, which rises 10,000 meters in heights. Modern is a harsh, cold land where snow has been covering all centuries, not melting from the very origins of time. Due to the harsh cold, most monsters do not even dare to get into these mountains. They say that it is here that the unicorn lives. Their bodies absorb the icy magical power, and most of all this energy is collected in a luxurious horn. The unicorns that survive in such harsh conditions are extremely high, so the materials obtained from them have exceptional quality and prestigious rank. Masamune is wondering if they are really hunting in the mountains. The girl replies that from time to time the unicorns descend to the foot. As she mentioned earlier, the rapier was forged from the unicorn horn, so her blade is filled with ice magnetic force. Of course, it is a rapier, a work of the best masters blacksmiths, so its cost reaches 5 million. Sweat drops appeared on the face. Masamune asked in layers whether the girl has the magic of ice. If so, this rapier will be the perfect weapon for her. The girl agreed, but noticed that these weapons were too expensive. She could not yet call herself an experienced knight, so she decided to look for a more affordable option. Masamune thinks whether or not to buy it. Shira, however, states that it is undoubtedly the best rapier of all. The glitter of the blade, the sophistication of the garda, and the shape of the hand. In this weapon he captures literally everything. In addition, it is imbued with ice magic, so it is a really perfect weapon. After listening to it, he promises to take her to the lair and passes the consultant with 5 million. The girl cried out, exclaiming that she was not worth such an expensive gift and should not accept it. The guy smiles and assures that he was too late. He bought the rapier in advance. After that, he extends the weapon of the girl. The girl gently presses the blade to the breast and sincerely thanks Masamune. She promises that from now on, this sword will be her most valuable relic. For a while, a man from the wine shop returns Masamune Kleinox. The guy is wondering how the sword was evaluated. The man replies that experts were unable to determine the cost of these weapons. Cheris suggested that in this case the sword belongs to the legendary rank. However, the man denied because, according to him, the seller assured that he was able to unmistakably determine the legendary rank. This indicates that the sword has almost legendary status. The layer confessed that she had never met anything like this, but the man assured that he had already had such a rarity. Masamune is wondering if this sword is extremely rare. The man replies that for many years no one has met things of mythical rank or higher. Without exaggeration, believed that such artifacts had long been disappeared from the world. However, in the ranks they are still provided. The existence of armor of this level is only a guess. Like the theory of monsters of immortal rank. The seller assured that he managed to make measurements, but he is unable to determine the rank of the subject, if he is higher than the legendary. So it is not necessary to rely on his words. Masamune reflects that if this sword belonged to Kun, he would first hope for a truly high rank. But even such an impressive value seems to him unexpected. The young man remembered how Sean advised him to pass this snake sword to a demonic girl, because the weapon was unusual and could not fit the young man himself. He insists that TA is listened to her carefully, and she is wondering if it will be difficult for her to fight this sword. The girl accepts weapons, enthusiastically notes her value, and jokingly notes that it would be worthwhile to leave such a treasure for herself. Masamune notes that this sword clearly does not fit him. He invites her to make this impression. Being a healer, Masamune will not be able to use this weapon, so she looks more. The girl carefully examines the blade and states that they are changing sword. The man is surprised, they say. The guy is an unusual. He gives out valuable things to strangers without any hesitation. Masamune only shrugs. For him this treasure means nothing. The man draws attention to the bounty generosity, calling it either excessive generosity or stupidity, to which Masamune replies that he is an ordinary man. He thinks that he apparently changed. He has always been lonely, and now he met the girls and is grateful to them with all my heart. At this point, a huge portrait of Albert Morlo was in front of all Major, and the king himself stood solemnly. He said Albert Morlo was their friend. For many years, he has tirelessly supported them in the kingdom for many years. For Gray, the book's death of such a magician is an irreparable loss that nothing is filled. The king notes that no retribution is expected from them, so their words in honor of a friend who died now have a special weight. At first, they plan to hide it from everyone. He emphasizes that all present divide their sadness and experience loss of loss together. So, in his opinion, everyone has the full right to know the truth. In fact, Alberto Morlo died at the hands of a Dragonheart, an organization that challenged the kingdom itself. The king exclaims that he is swore by all the subjects of the kingdom. Every scoundrel from that organization is sure to suffer martyrdom. Only in this way will they be able to atone for their debt. At this point, a girl was at the first training field of the National Academy of the Kingdom of Arias. She reported to Masamune classmates the terrible news. Mr. Albert died. She reported that the Dragonheart organization, dangerous criminals that encroach on the lives of politicians and aristocrats, appeared not far from the borders of the kingdom yesterday. Albert immediately rushed there, however. Unfortunately, he was defeated. She explained that her purpose was to convey to the boys and girls the sad news of Albert's death, because it was here that she appeared here. But, it seems, her words only depressed the youth and wore their soul. One of the classmates of Masamune, who once teased him, confessed that Mr. Albert had taught them magic and always remained good, even when they did not work out. He was a wonderful mentor, so everyone is grateful to him, and ask him to pass on his last will. The girl thanked them sincerely, and adds that she is sure Albert would certainly be proud of such guys. She shares her thoughts about the need to win the King of Demons in order to restore peace and harmony to these lands. This statement not only became the main slogan of Griberg, but also serves as the last covenant of Albert. She says that boys and young people are the hope of Albert and the whole kingdom, so she asks to give them his strength. After a while, Seiki approaches a young man named Ichizo and addresses him. He asked in surprise if he really did not pay attention to Eris's words. They all seek to benefit their country and improve in training, so everyone has a honesty to fulfill their responsibilities. The young man replies that he listened carefully, but now he has free time, so he spends him as he wants, because the rest also matters. He looks at the dick and notes that he constantly gets him because of any little thing, so he apparently felt something like that. The Seiki exploded by ordering Ichiyogi to silence and not to mention more of the dead. In response, the guy noted that the woman also appeared to tell them about this dead. Seiki wondered in Ichizo that he meant remembering the dead man. Did he talk about Arisa? In response, Ichizo asked who Seiki was talking about. Seiki, Grobion, and a man with a difficult character, though in his soul he does not understand the prostate. The young man is wondering what Ichizo says. He clarifies in response. It is a woman. Probably. And in her last words there is some trick. Saki grabs a classmate for the collar. and sharply asks on what basis he states. The young man, in response to the question, why does Saki so desperately seek to protect this woman? He is wondering how everyone reacted to her story about the death of the old man. Even with the naked eye, it is clear that this story inspired the audience even more. Although in fact, the tragedy. A man died. She was killed. Not just someone, but a prominent sage who faithfully served the kingdom of decades, would be more natural. He lowers his hand and asks if it was strange. Each time an Aries appears, he certainly starts a conversation with gloomy news. He tells either the evil that has met the kingdom, or the death of people at the hands of demons. Before going, she always finds good words. For example, emphasizes how she believes in boys. The boys immediately rush to workouts with unprecedented passion, while the girls did not inspire it too much. In the meantime, Old Dead was increasingly appearing nearby, accompanying every appearance of carefree laughter. After his death, the Aries appears and voices his last will. It seems as if everything is happening behind the scenario of that woman. Ichijo is convinced that it is the usual brainwashing. Suddenly, a man approaches them and is interested in what is happening here. Seiki replies that nothing happened. They just reflected on common plans for the future. Seiki emphasizes that they need to train more often for the welfare of the kingdom. The man encourages his hand on his shoulder and says that he puts great hopes on him. Once the teacher came out, Ichizo, without holding back emotions, added that the current sake only causes him at once, because even before everything was not so bad. The guy in response suggested that Ichizo think that he would be pleased, but promised he would not be conveyed. The fact is that Ichijo is endowed with great power, and therefore is of great importance for the whole kingdom. Ichijo himself also draws attention to the incredible dedication of sowing to these lands. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by the girls who stood nearby and heard every word. One of them turned to the boys loudly so that they would stop, because everyone may already get bored with endless ghosts of Ichizo. Another girl recalls that once Ichizo was a real handsome man, and now he has not left a trace. Only disappointment. Each of you smiled and said that the girls, in your opinion, remain unchanged. They seem to see their own nose. The girl went in hysterics every time when he spoke the explosion. Suddenly, a powerful explosion came over her. Ichizo cast a formidable look at them and said that they were leeches. They would be caught forever and would not be released. If he does not fit them, they will immediately switch to Psyche. Ichizo asked who they clinging to the next when Saki disappeared. He notes that, hiding behind someone's back, people can say everything he pleases, and not bear any responsibility for it. If Hideak himself decided to reveal, above him, most likely, they just laughed until they were finally tired. Psyche asks with interest whether it is a shame to use magic to intimidate others. He addresses the guy with a sharp question. Does he consider himself a coward? For every remark, he is insincere that he was not talking about abuse. The Psyche no longer stands. He grasps every question for the caller and insistently requires to think, really, who is actually guilty here. Subsequently, each of you remained alone. He made a way near the tree, hesitantly hesitating whether they were all important. After the Hidaka's expulsion, everyone had to see the true face of the Aries. She laughed at her horrible face, condemning him to death. It was simply impossible to imagine a good person. He is convinced that after all, they are only pawns in someone else's game. If they believe that they are not suitable for anything, they will be thrown away like Hidak's time. But it is likely that they will simply not give a chance, and will get rid of forever. Aiko amazes why no one notices it. Looking in the face of the Masamune, she quietly asks whether he is still alive in this world. Subsequently, Masamune, along with the girls, reached Rodhousen. Without spending time, they went to the Sharon bench and gave her all the materials obtained from the bodies of the basilisks. The woman was amazed at the fact that they managed to catch up to 3 basilisks. Because even one can handle it extremely difficult, and here are 3. The woman turned to the boy and wondered if she was fine with her, for which the girl assured that she was feeling great. The girl remembered the words Masamune. The young man asked her not to tell anyone that it was he who destroyed the basiliskov. She realized that even Sharon should not know about it, so she exclaimed that she was hiding some secret. Masamune decided to translate the conversation into another channel and asked how the woman plans to use the ingredients from basilisk. In response, she smiled mysteriously and said that she would boil a special potion. Asking them to wait a little, she went to her enchanting affairs. Soon the woman appeared, holding a bottle with herbs. Masamune wondered what they needed this mysterious drink for. The woman is surprised. Is it not clear that she is about to use the elixir to erase the slave label of the Numa? Masamune is wondering if this is really possible. The woman confidently replies that undoubtedly. However, few people are aware of this effect, because the secret potion is usually used for a completely different purpose. She strictly asks the Nemus to listen carefully and then warns, "The medicine is a little painful and will have to be patient." The girl confidently states that she will handle. Meanwhile, Sharon advises Masatsum to be alert and prepare to use medical magic. According to her sign, he should be healed on the wound. She does not put special hopes on it, but the guy must use all the power of his spell. The Masamune shudders and assures that he understood everything. The woman pours something on the girl's hand and immediately bends in pain. Karen reassures that it will not last long, so he advises the girl to suffer. It continues to pour the potion carefully into the wound, and then turns to Masamune loudly, ordering him to use medical magic. The guy applied the magic of healing, and the burn on his hand disappeared. Seeing how the girl is exhausted of fatigue, Masamune used a spell that removes the effects of fatigue. Leaning to her, he was quietly interested in whether everything was fine. The girl with a smile replied that she has no pain or dizziness, so everything is well with her. They pay attention to her elbow. He completely erased. The layer is enthusiastically commented. This is incredible, because the mysterious elixir is made of basilisk fangs. She only knew that this remedy strengthened the body, but did not expect this effect. Sharon explains that this substance is usually used as a tonic, but if you add a little more poison, you can get this result. The poison cuts the skin, causing unbearable pain. In addition, if you mix the ingredients in the wrong proportions, the skin may be sought, so you should act with maximum caution. Just in case, if suddenly something goes wrong, it is preparing to apply a medical spell. And to further safe, adds an ingredient that can relieve the oath. At this point, Masamune notices the extraordinary softness of the skin. Sharon looks at Masamune and notes that he is simply impressively calm. She has never seen the healing magic acted so lightly. In addition, the guy managed to use the spell that removed the effects. She had no idea that it could eliminate fatigue. Who would have thought? Looking at the massacre that he was under the power, the layer confesses that he also sees this for the first time. It turns out that the young man not only learned to assign attributes, he wondered if it was normal at all, that the healer had that ability. Sharon notes that this is a real rarity, a healer who has so much. Usually in the arsenal of most healers, there is only the simplest healing spell that is available from the beginning. However, this method is still significantly inferior to the efficiency of similar priests. Even among experienced healers, the ability to accurately give attributes is a rarity, and those who do it at least partially are considered special. Whatever the healer did not seek to capture new magic, his desires will only be a reason for mockery. Even if he puts the whole soul, the maximum he can achieve is perfect treatment and distribution of attributes. That is why everyone considers healers to the weakest class. Masamune recalls the Arisen's facial expression when she spoke these words. Sharon notes that Masamune has changed a little. She is wondering if he has other spells. The guy replies that, in general, he is able to increase the force of attack and protection of the allies. Sharon and Cherish are so amazed at the herd that for a moment they cannot even say a word. The girl specifies with distrust, "Does the spell-in-law which is discussed is the ominous name Aura of Hatred?" The young man nods in response. Sharon notes that this is a very powerful spell. She did not even hear about healers who have such abilities. The young man asks what magic is. Although she is not combat, her strength is still striking. Sharon replies that the strengthening of this spell of a completely different grade. Moreover, since few people are able to master it, the cost of such magic is increasing even more. Masamune smiles, thinking that, although its class remains weakest, it has become much easier thanks to the powerful sorcery in the soul. For a while, the adventurer's registering girl officially announced that the task of neutralizing basilisk was completed successfully, and all merit have already been enrolled. She honorably reports that Mr. Neato received an increase in rank. She asks him to congratulate him on this significant event. The girl announces that Miss Tutorika rose to S. Masamune, intervening excitedly, asks her to stop and insists that there was definitely a mistake. He is amazed at how he managed to get rank B, if he was only F in a few days ago, and also had a rank C. The girl is convinced that there can be no mistake, because it is a personal decision of the head of the guild. Masimon looks at the layer and asks whether they really raise so quickly here. The girl replies that at least a year is usually used to raise one step. Usually, it takes not just years of hard work to obtain higher rank. The higher your level, the more difficult it is to reach the next top. Masamune thinks that at least 4 years will go from F class to category B, and even a month has not been delayed here. The layer confesses that it does not have all the necessary information. However, if the Masimon wants, it can turn to the head of the guild. The young man, however, politely refuses, assuring that everything is fine. Then the registering girl turns to the layer and reports that she was prepared for her, which she had not had previously received. She is offered to get acquainted with the document and sign in the appropriate place. The Masimon realized that it was a reward for a nutline. He even suggested that his increase is quite possible with this story. He did not think of any other explanations. However, he remembers that the guild is registered under the name of Neato, while for Reinhard he is known as Masamune. However, Hilda already knows that Neato and Masamunis are the same person. The young man suddenly realizes that he has been trapped. From now on, both the guild and the White Royal Knights have learned the truth. Nido and Masamuna are actually the same person. If so continues, the nickname will lose any meaning. Suddenly, the flow of the young man's thoughts sharply breaks the appearance of a stranger. Masamune looks around and notices a well-known man who exclaims that the guy gets again for the task in the area. He is amazed. Did he still not understand his own helplessness? And as soon as she was informed that the girl was called to the head office, the young man assured the layer that she could go, because everything will be fine. They say goodbye. The man breaks again with a cry, outraged by the fact that he is not considered. He states that he will not despise himself with any non-registration, only able to deal with the goblins. However, she does not intervene in the conversation. She calls a man evil and strictly demands that he leaves her master alone. The man is interested in who this girl is, and soon charming over the young man, they say. He appears every time in the company of the new companion. She adds with a smile that they probably have already had time, because the guy seems not of those who squeeze something. The husband apologizes to her, explaining that he is doing this healer. Suddenly, Nimu flashes fury, jumps and applies his cat skill. Heezing accurately, he causes a man's cat to a public cat. He flies to the other end of the guild. Nimu states, they say, this scoundrel is bullied by his master, so let him feel the strength of the cat's fist. Witnesses recognized a man named Yoga, and confirmed that he could not drink at all. Masamune immediately realized that this blow is the same cat fist, which she mentioned. As Sharonide claimed, undoubtedly, it was not much stronger than any healer. Masamune is interested in why she could not use her cat fist when she was seized by drug dealers. The girl explains that then she could not control herself. Tua suggests that she was probably given to breathe a mototab or something like that. She also recalls that a maid with cat traits worked in the castle, and heard that a mototabi was acting as if he were driving crazy. Indeed, with age, this influence is weakening, and special training helps them to tolerate the smell. Masamune is interested in whether such workouts have been done. The girl shrugs her shoulders, confessing that she is not sure. Meanwhile, in the castle, Red Geisen Shara hesitantly froze at the majestic door, politely apologizing for an unexpected visit. In front of her opened the hall of the White Order of the Royal Knights. The layer apologizes for his late. The hall enters the Akuhorit layer, a knight of the 7th category from the White Royal Order. She answered her a girl who took the 6th position in the rating, Emily Anderson. She reassured the interlocutor, they say, there is no reason to worry. Everyone knew that the layer could be delayed, so they just started to prepare on their own. The knight of the White Royal Order of the 5th rank. Edward Scott thanked for his devotion and diligent work. The room also housed the knight of the 4th rank with black. The man noted that Shura probably went to the task with that guy. The third in the title among the White Royal Knights, Hilda Ekaret, asked the magic, as her mission passed and whether she managed to make her girlfriend with the girl of the White Cats. The 2nd rank of the White Order Knight, Daniel King, urged everyone to silence so as not to interfere with Reinhard. He, in turn, noted that everyone seems to have been gathered. Edward Scotch interrupts him and notes that before moving to the main question, I would like to ask a question. Why not justify the layer directly that they plan to install a guy? It would be wrong to hide it. The layer is confused with surprise. Daniel King explains that this decision was made by His Majesty. To find out the true intentions of Masimon, it was first sent to Vika with the layer. The commander of the White Royal Knights of the first rank, Reinhard Rickman, emphasizes, from the very beginning, he was aware of the situation, which is why he instructed the Shur to accomplish this difficult task. However, this was not the cause of today's meeting. He solemnly reports that a dragon heart appeared in Griberg. Nilda is interested in the layers that happened to her, and in response he hears that everything is fine. In fact, as a real white knight, she should report that they had invited Masimon. However, the girl is hesitant, because he does not know how the rest will perceive this news. Reinhardt reports that the meeting is ongoing, and announces the main topic of discussion. A prohibited ritual of calling heroes has been prohibited in Griberg. Everyone in the room was struck by this news. The audience could not believe what heard. Suddenly, the black genius laughed loudly, saying that all the inhabitants of Griberg had been crazy. It turns out that it is because of this that the dragon's heart and arrived in the city. Reinhardt agrees that this is quite possible. He says that there are already the first victims. Albert Marlowe's forest magician is no longer alive. It is said that a farewell ceremony has already taken place. Edward remembered that he had already heard about this magician. During the war, his famous ability to conquer whole Earth through magic truly caught the horror of enemies. The genius points out that if you remember the story with the kingdom of Tviderant, it would not be in the spirit of the dragon heart to calm down after the death of only one magician. Suddenly the layer gets up, apologizes, and then interested in the case of the call of the heroes. The genius is amazed. Did the girl not even hear about it? However, he notes that this is quite clear, because it is usually not a matter of talking. The challenge of heroes is a kind of magic of call, but it is significantly different from those who are already familiar with. The essence of the ritual of the challenge of the heroes is quite simple. They move to our world of bravers from other realities. The layer is wondering whether heroes from fairy tales are talking. The genius confesses that the idea is quite right, but this is not quite true. It is impossible to limit yourself only in such a definition. The heroes are called those who were summoned into this world, although they tell that they once called the so-called insane monsters. Each of the called is endowed with the so-called divine protection, a blessing. It can be manifested in exceptionally high initial characteristics, or allow you to possess powerful magic from the beginning. They say that these characters are distinguished by unique classes and extraordinary skills. The layer is wondering why this spell is forbidden. Reinhard replies that the cause is the sacrifice of people with a call. To perform this ritual requires a tremendous consumption of mana, and, after all, this is how the core of mana is formed. The layer explains that the man core is able to exist inside other creatures, so why make people sacrifice? Reinhard recalls that the genius had already said something like this. During the incident with the call of the monster, then it was also sacrificed. However, the prompted demon turned out to be crazy, and did not respond at all to the words addressed to him. The rite ended with a bloody tragedy. Since then, this floor has been used solely for human sacrifices. The genius notes that this magic is dangerous for another reason. The layer is interested in what it means. The man explains that the creation of man Korra seems to be an elementary business, but so many mana cannot be collected only by sacrifices. The kernel has a certain restriction. It is incapable of generating the flow of mana until the victim's body is completely destroyed. Cher expresses that this limit should be overcome, but at the same time, she is interested. How can it be done? The genius points out that despair and horror may well bring a person to extreme actions. He asks whether she guesses how easier to instill in both fear and despair. The girl, with the torture and reading the answers, claims that she is smart. To cause victim to unbearable pain and horror without rest. To the extreme, but not to kill, because with the death of the victim he dies, and the nucleus. And in the end, when the spirit is finally broken, the restriction on the nucleus disappears, and the bodies of the subjects shine with bright light, passing all their manu. Only when all this is done can you begin the rite of calling the heroes. The layer is interested in how many will have to sacrifice, but the genius only shrugs and answers that this question has no answer. He suggests that this number can reach hundreds or even thousands of people. For the last time, when this ritual was performed, rumors of the mysterious disappearance of people across the country were spreading. The layer retreated back, embarrassing. Having guessed her anxiety, Reinhardt noted that he has not changed the past. Even if he assumes that the Supreme Dragon leaves Griberg alone, sooner or later the kingdom will be forced to fight the demons. He asks all those present to memorize it well. The layer has finally realized how frightening the magic that needs human casualties could be. She did not even suspect that this is possible. Meanwhile, Reinhard noted that he was ready, and wondered if someone had something else to discuss. Daniel unexpectedly noted that he had one important news related to the recent destruction of a nut vine. It turned out that someone had stolen his body yesterday. Shara did not pay any attention to them. There was only one thing concerned. She still knew nothing about magic. A little time passed, and everyone gathered in the house of Sheer to fry the barbecue together. The girl's father pulls firewood for fire and watches joyfully how long they have not spent time with the whole company. The man confessed that when the layer and Hilda were still very small, they often fried meat together, so it causes him pleasant memories from the past. Masamune laid out pieces of meat from the bag and noted that it was so much that it would be enough for all servants. Everyone will be able to eat. The man thanked the young man, because at least 15 maids worked on the estate. The young man assured that the meat should be enough for everyone. He pointed to the table where a little stein meat lay, a gift for gratitude for the task. A separate, much larger piece of meat was visible. They have already purchased it on their own. Masamune asked the man not to give up the offer. It would be a kind of gratitude for all his efforts. The man thanked the young man sincerely, and then ordered the maid to collect everyone at the table. The young man pulled 5 bottles of alcohol and another barrel. He assured the interlocutor that he could give this wine, because he had enough stocks. The man smiled and confessed that he possesses a large vineyard, so he always has a lot of various strong drinks. He grabs a bottle of wine and exclaims with horror that he holds something ancient in his hands. Suddenly he appears and reports that the layer and Gilda have already come. Subsequently, everyone admired the fried meat and tasted exquisite wine. Even the chef could not hold her tears. For the first time in his life he was lucky to try so long time and noble drink. Masamune watches carefully at all, and sincerely rejoices in their happiness. Suddenly, then he approaches and notes that it is wonderful when everyone around is happy. But immediately she is worried. She asks Masamune about the layer, because the girl seems to her depressed and not at all like herself. He looks at the girl sitting alone and notes he understands everything himself. He soon approaches her and politely asks for permission to join and sit side by side. He squats and asks what happened to that girl. The layer asks Masamune if he knows something about calling the characters. The young man responds in surprise, but later replies that he heard about this. The girl is wondering if the guy really understands why this ritual is considered forbidden. Masamune replies that he knows about the sacrifice of people. The girl is amazed at his rest and asks why he is so immobile. Today, she first learned about the rite, as well as the horrific sacrifices and torture that accompanied him. Masamune is stunned by this development of events, and without being surprised, asks that it is for a new kind of torture. After some time, the Sheer confesses to him in everything, telling the truth about the ritual, and adds that she had no idea about the existence of such magic. However, she realizes that as a white knight at the yard, she should be ready to accept the truth from which she would prefer to turn away. However, now witchcraft causes a slight fear. The guy is wondering, isn't that a common thing? Not every sorcery requires a victim. In his opinion, the Sharer should not be worried about such things. There will always be good and evil people in the world. Protective magic coexists with the forbidden, and they will exist nearby until we exist. In his opinion, everything is decided not by the magic itself, but the one who uses it. And if it is still difficult for a girl, he is always ready to listen to her, just as now. He also reminds that there is always a toe next to the shear. There is no guild, so she should say everything that is in her soul until he feels relief. And the guy will be near, ready to listen. The girl cannot hold back and hugs the young man firmly. She asks to turn to her simple, a layer, without any official formalities, because they have become close friends. So the girl is at the same time wondering whether he can call the young man just a Masamune. Masamune notices that Sheer is upset and agrees to her proposal. Suddenly, someone's exclamation came from the side. Someone stated that so dishonestly, and then rushed to the layer and Masamune, asking that this girl was doing next to her lord. The girl throws a disrespectful look on the layer and reproaches her in insincerity, because she was one who hugged Masamune.